Mr. Dave, Co-Chairman Nethercott, Chairman Nicholas.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Okay, I'm still getting my screen mixed. So when I pulled into the parking lot out here, I almost hit the telephone pole. I was about this far, trying to get out of the way of traffic, and it was a little sled. Sat at a stoplight for 3 turns, just waiting for the tow trucks to get out of the way. All right, first up is retirement. Dave, please proceed. And Sam.
Morning, Mr. Co-Chairman, Madam Co-Chairman, members of the committee. This is Agency 072, the Wyoming Retirement System. I'm David Swindell, the Executive Director of the system. With me at the table is our Chief Investment Officer, Sam Masudi. In the back of the room, I have several members of my staff, including our General Counsel, Ben Brandis, Deputy Director, Rachel Meeker.
You might need Ben today. We'll see.
I always need Ben. I need a lot of supervision. From the board, we're pleased to have this morning in attendance board member Jim Ruby, and on the Zoom, we'll have board member Jeremy Smith from Sheridan County School District number 1 in Ranchester. He is our chairman of our Legislative and Benefits Committee. And our board chairman, Tom Chapman, is zooming in from Jackson, and he's on the screen, as you can see. He intended to be here personally, but he's had some illness and didn't want to bring that into the committee room, so he'll zoom in this morning. This is an important session for us. Mr. Chairman, here's the plan that I would go through if you're okay with it. We're going to have introductory remarks from the board members, Mr. Smith and Mr. Chapman. And then I'm going to provide some further detail on the reorganization and personnel requests that make up the heart of the exception requests in this year's biennial budget request for the retirement system. In your materials, we provided some talking points and this proposed wiring chart. I've also provided that in hard copy. I thought for this committee session, it might be easier to refer to a hard copy, so we provided that to the committee. It's simple. It's all on one page. Oh yeah, it's 11 by 17 and on both sides. So we'll talk through that, and then we'll talk into the exception requests. We'll go through every one of them. There are 24 of them, and of course we have 3 units in the retirement system, and they're organized by unit, so there's a little skipping around, but I will guide you page by page for committee members that may have made notes on an individual request, and so that everybody will have a chance to do that. Would that be okay?
That's fine, but ultimately we want you to just begin at the front and go unit by unit.
We will,
and not just bouncing around to the exception.
Section, go unit by unit, and we'll take the exceptions as they lay within the unit.
very good. We can do that. No worry. There's not a lot of jumping around.
It's just because that's the way we walk through it, and so it's
right.
Easy, particularly for the newer folks. It's just easier to follow with.
With that, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to introduce our chairman of the board, Tom Chapman.
Thank you, Dave. Members of the committee, good morning. I apologize for not being in person, but there are 2 good aspects of this. One, you hopefully won't catch what I have, and secondly, my remarks will be a lot briefer. I am chair of the retirement system. So the question is really, why are we here, and why do we have so many board members participate in this? Because we think this is so important. We're making a critical budget request for personnel and cybersecurity services. This request includes 4 positions in investments, 4 positions in operations, and 1 contract conversion. The way to look at this is not necessarily us building out a new unit, a new service. This is really deferred maintenance. This is the way we think about it as an older house and trying to make sure that the house does not fall down. What's also great about, I guess, this proposal is we are very much trying to think in terms of how do we do more with less. And assuming if this proposal is approved, we will still be under 10 to 20% our peers. So we would be at about 9.8 basis points post-approval versus an industry average of 10.8 in the industry. So the cost of this, and Dave and Sam will get into the details of this, is about 1.9 million for the biennium, or about $968,000, or about a 9.5% increase in our budget. So how did we get to this point? We got to this point, we went through our strategic plan in our last board meeting. And this is what the board, looking at this from a business perspective, and the great thing is, because we have different business people on our board, of how would they look at it if they owned this business. And this is what we kind of came up with. One, we realized that we have inadequate investment tracking, that we just don't have enough people to track the investments the way that we think we would like to. We really haven't grown much in terms of size. In fact, we haven't grown at all on the investment side since 2018. And we feel that this creates a lack of support. There's also a lack of coordination, which is really on the overall, and Dave will talk about the agency in terms of overseeing benefits, educators, and front desk contacts. Also, on our communication, we're very vulnerable. We have one person, and relying on one single point of contact poses major risks. When we think about the communication to our constituents is so important. We don't have a cybersecurity specialist. And then we also have thin leadership succession. So one of the things that's so important is, if Dave did sort of miss the turn this morning and hit a pole, who's going to take over for him? And what we're trying to do is build a better system so that we feel better about succession. So the bottom line is, really, duct tape solutions aren't going to last. And so that's why we've really come to you, frankly, with this, pretty large ask. We look at this as a risk mitigation. The board has a fiduciary responsibility to make sure that this plan is stable. And frankly, we look a lot of this at key man risk. And Sam will talk further about how, if he loses people, of what this means from a key man risk. Historical turnover for our agency has been about 12%. During the COVID period, we turned over about a third. Dave did a fantastic job of basically getting people to step up and take larger responsibilities. But we, like other agencies, have been having pretty large turnover. We are very much behind in our back middle office accounting. And we have seen this with other agencies. And I think what's so important, and from at least my experience with other agencies, we don't want to fall behind on our accounting. That is something that just can't happen. And lastly, on the cybersecurity, I know you all have been hearing it from agency to agency about cybersecurity. And frankly, we're going to throw our 2 cents in there too. Back in May, about 10 pensions, the PBI data breach hack happened. And this caused about 1.2 million participants and beneficiaries of, not only it wasn't money, but it was really information that was lost. So the question is really, on a cyber hack, it's not a question of if it'll happen, it's just a question of when. And so we just think it is incredibly important. And again, why is this so important to the state of Wyoming? We know that this is the financial security for all the public and for all the employees, and also very important in terms of their personal information and financial security. The fact that 1 out of every 7 Wyomingites is directly impacted in the Wyoming retirement system means that we need to make sure that this house is not going to fall down. The last point, too, is we want to make sure that we have a strong pension, is because we know it's the #1 recruiting tool for employees. And so this is incredibly important that we keep this. And then lastly, I'll say, and we always say this is our catchphrase at the Wyoming retirement system: no strain on the general fund. Now, I know I'm going to get blowback on that, but it's we can fund it out of our own assets. So lastly, I'm going to conclude on this, co-chairs, that frankly, we think this is a smart use of resources. That this is not just about trying to grow government and make things bigger. All this is trying to do is basically support the people that we have. It's really no different than, frankly, in a law firm about, we need to hire some paralegals, or we need to hire in the investment world some financial analysts, because it's not appropriate use of time of partners trying to dig up research. We're not overspending. As I mentioned before, even if this is approved, we're still going to be one of the most efficient pensions in the country at about 10 basis points below what the industry average is. We think that, frankly, a strong pension helps the Wyoming economy, as I said. We think it also keeps things safe. And frankly, the bottom line is, the way that we think about it as board members, as fiduciaries, we want to be responsible. And this is being responsible because we don't feel that this is overspending, but frankly, this is just maintaining. And this has been years of deferred maintenance that frankly has not happened. So we think we're going to be getting more than what we're spending. And again, following that Wyoming adage of doing more with less. And then lastly, I will make one other point that back in 2016, we asked for 8 positions. So this is larger, this is 9, and we got 7. Let's think about when in 2016, most of that was for the investment staff. We made that investment. Look today where our investment team is. We're close to #1 in the country in returns. We've had stability in the team. We have done incredibly well. And that was an investment made by taking a chance at a very large budget ask. So this is something we don't take lightly. And so I say for the board, and again, we have a very motivated board, as you're going to hear from Jeremy and some others. We really think this is very important. So I will end my remarks. And Jeremy, let me pass the baton to you.
Thank you, Tom. And Mr. Co-Chair, Madam Co-Chair, members of the Joint Appropriations Committee. As Tom indicated, my name is Jeremy Smith. I'm the business manager for Sheridan County School District #1. I appreciate the opportunity to join you by Zoom today. Today, I'm wearing my board member hat for the Wyoming Retirement System. I just wanted to kind of follow on what our chairman's comments were. This is a very serious and thoughtful budget request. We've worked on this for the full year that I've been on the committee, thinking about what is it that we need to do our jobs better. We have an important task to secure the retirement futures of tens of thousands of Wyoming citizens. And we looked around the room. We went top to bottom review. We engaged the reports of consultants. We looked at we had commentary and interviews with the staff. And you probably all know, but we have a very talented board that are not representatives of the members. I represent some part of the membership, right? But we have 5 industry professionals on our board that this is what they do every day as part of their daily job. And when they look at this and we look at this together, we have some gaps. We need to fill those gaps. This is a big ask. We understand that. But we didn't ask for 9 hoping to get 4. We asked for 9 to get 9. We didn't play the trick of asking for 18 to get 9 and any of that nonsense. This is a situation where we believe with all of our professional experience and knowledge that this is a necessary and appropriate change to the organization for all of the reasons that Chairman Chapman outlined. And we hope you give it the due consideration it deserves. Certainly, our executive director, Dave Swindell, and chief investment officer, Sam Asadi, can go through all the nuts and bolts with you. But we're all here to sort of lend our support as those that have been tasked with managing this system. So I appreciate the opportunity to give comments. I'll certainly stand for any questions, as I know any of our other board members will. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll yield my time.
Mr. Chairman, I think that means it's back to me.
Okay, go ahead.
Members of the committee, I'm going to talk you briefly through this organizational chart before we get into the unit by unit request, so that you have a good understanding of the whole integrated plan. I'm going to start in the upper right-hand quadrant of the printout, and that's the investment team. The proposal from the board is to add 4 positions to the investment team. The color coding on the chart The investment asks are in green. The administrative requests were in brown. There are certain reclassifications for existing employees that are indicated in blue. And then the yellow markings, either the outline or the yellow circles, are the ones that the governor's office is recommending approval on. So in the investment team, the ask is to finally provide the investment team with middle and back office support that they've never had. This is to administer capital calls, address liquidity issues, answer public information requests, prepare information packets, prepare board packets, and so on, all of which is diverting the investment personnel from doing investment activity. These are highly paid professionals, and we really don't want to spend their time putting books together. We want them to be researching investment ideas. Those three positions here are all indicated of that. There's a risk officer recommended for approval. Sam can talk more about that. This is going to identify and help manage the portfolio. We actually will have an operations person to coordinate all the administration necessary with this.
Point out which one you're talking about on each one that you,
These are the two yellow positions here.
and so I don't see green very well, so I don't even see.
Yeah,
green on
well,
it.
they're light green, and then we overlaid it with yellow just to make it hard for you.
Yeah.
Everybody else okay. And then there are two positions that the board is requesting, which will be deferred for future budgets. One is yet another support person. And then, of course, the investment analyst, which is our third request to have that position restored. With that, I'm going to turn the mic over
So
to
before you go on, which of these positions would have performance compensation?
just the investment analyst, which is currently deferred.
Go ahead.
Sam?
Dave, we see what the governor's recommended and what you requested. Prioritize those four. If you prioritize those four, did the governor recommend the two highest priorities, or would you have preferred it be differently?
The governor's recommendation is in concurrence with our priorities.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so yeah, just as an overview, Mr. Chairman. So yes, Sam Masudi, Chief Investment Officer, Wyoming Retirement System. We're requesting these positions because we think it's the smart business decision. If we're running a private entity, this is what we would think is important. I think without these positions, we're leaving a lot of money on the table by not finding certain investments and making them. And when I say leaving money on the table, I'm talking about tens of millions of dollars. We're exposed to potentially not understanding some risks in the portfolio and exposures. And third, we're at risk of losing investment staff, which could lead to a crisis. Staff departures have a way of cascading. So we think these are very important. So our current setup, we're really understaffed. We have 7 investment people. And when you look at this org chart, it looks like a lot of people, but there are a couple summer interns on there as well. So we have 7 investment people and 1 accountant. And so the investment staff is performing all of the back office work and a substantial amount of the accounting and administrative work, which is not really sustainable. I think if you look at top performing funds, most are not structured this way. Most have a robust middle office, back office, which allows the investment team to focus on investing. If we were a private entity, the staff size would probably be 3 or 4 times, just because the risk of missing opportunities or having failed investments is too great. And I would say, if you looked at the time of the entire investment team, half is being spent on non-investment related activity in that accounting. So that's a general overview. I can go into more detail in some of the areas, or I can hold off. I don't know if you have a preference.
Let's see if the committee has.
So I think one of the questions will be that you'll hear is how many of these will be required to live and work in Cheyenne versus remotely, the positions you're requesting?
Mr. Chairman, yeah, we anticipate that they would all work in Cheyenne. We don't know until we actually get the pool and start talking to people, but my expectation would be these are probably going to be people in Cheyenne. And likely hired from Wyoming, I think, is a decent.
Senator
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sullivan.
So quick, you said you used the phrase leaving money on the table. With these positions, are they, I mean, you're paying for them. Do you foresee that if these are added, they're going to pay for themselves with the increased investments that you're going to be getting?
Yeah, I do. And there are no guarantees. Oh, Mr. Chairman, Senator Salazar. Yes, I think they definitely will. Tom had mentioned earlier by increasing the staff from 4 to 8 people, that's probably cost about $400,000 or $500,000 a year. And over the last 5 years, we've produced $730 million in additional profit. So I think it's very potentially high returning decision.
Mr. Co-Chairman, Senator Salazar, I might follow up with a kind of a story that illustrates how this kind of works. We had a opportunity that was one of our analysts was working with a firm. We had an opportunity a few years back to invest in a Delta Airlines aircraft buyout. Delta was trying to raise cash. They were going to sell 20 of their highest or their most efficient jets to a firm to raise cash, and then they were going to lease them back at very favorable rates. And so we were asked if we wanted to get into that deal. That deal was being led by one of the analysts who found out about it. The analyst at the time had the time to dig into the details of the deal. This all had to be wrapped up in about 3 or 4 days. But he managed to get an additional $5 million allocation to us. We were in it for 10. We wound up going in at 15 million. The extra 5 million was almost purely because of the analyst. Just wouldn't have happened if the analyst hadn't been there, right? Well, a year later, there was a buyout and we sold our position. We doubled our money. We sold that $15 million position for $29 million. Well, that meant that extra 5 million, of course, doubled too. So that analyst's time for those 3 days was worth $5 million. That's what can happen. And as Sam said, there's no guarantees. We could tell you about the uranium deal or some other things, but these are really smart people, and we need to keep them working on those deals and finding the deals that we're aware of and not having them on administrative tasks that are very important, like capital calls and so on, have to be done right and so on. So I don't want to minimize the importance of that, but it's segregation of duties and in using people appropriately. There's a lot of skilled attorneys in this room. Attorneys review documents. They don't write so much themselves. They work with paralegals. We may have brilliant surgeons in a hospital, but they depend also with nurses, the lab, the anesthesiologist. Healthcare isn't delivered just by surgeons and so on. So that's what we need to do here.
And Mr. Chairman, Senator Salazar, and maybe I'll just expand a little bit on the uranium investment. So one of our analysts 2 years ago came up with this idea of investing in uranium, and we invested $100 million. Over the last 2 years, we've made $70 million in profit off that one investment. This analyst has done a great job. He spends more than half his time on non-investing work. So I think to myself, if we were able to build out the middle office and he was able to find another uranium investment, that would pay our total operating costs for forever effectively. So it's a good example of what we're looking to do. Thank you.
Mr. Co-Chairman, I will pause and see if there's any other questions about the investment team for Sam or me from the committee.
Okay, please proceed.
Seeing none, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to ask the committee to flip over your chart. And I'm going to refer you to the blue diagram. This is a target organizational concept from Funston Advisory Services, which is a consultant that was hired in 2019 to do an operational organizational review of the retirement system. That report observed that the current organization of the Wyoming retirement system in many cases was idiosyncratic. That's their term. In many cases, the organization has evolved to meet the immediate needs rather than long-term needs, to adapt to the skills and positions and capabilities of the people that we have, and has been kind of put under a stress because of budget constraints and inability to fill some positions. They recommended a target organization that looks like this blue diagram. It essentially is you can describe it as a twin deputy situation. They described it as a chief financial officer and a chief operating officer concept. It would take all of the activities of the retirement system that are essentially financial in nature and put it under one supervisor, a chief operating officer or a deputy director for financial matters, however you want to label it. That means money in, contributions coming in, money out, distribution. It means investment accounting. It means financial accounting and the IT systems that operate all of that stuff. We would have unity of supervision over all of those activities. And then on the other side, we would have what many pension systems have, a chief operating officer or a chief benefit officer or a deputy director for operations. And that person would oversee and have unity of supervision over all of the activities that are typically encountered by our active members. This means education. It means the front desk contact center. It means the member benefits for retirement processing, the 457 plan, and just the communications and information that is supplied. Now, all of these people always have to work together, and they do now, but sometimes they are all reporting to different bosses, and there can be confusion. I mean, if the communications people put out a message and says, if you have any questions about this, please call this line, which is the member benefits line. Member benefits needs to know about that, right? Well, guess what? They work for two different people. And we try our best to solve those things. But in many cases, the organization works in spite of the org chart, not because of it. So that's the general concept. We're going to move in this direction. So now I'm going to go back to the front side. I'm going to direct the committee's attention to the lower left-hand quarter, where we seek two new positions, both of which are recommended for approval by the governor's office. On the far right, you'll see an investment accounting manager. This is another investment account. We have one, which we created out of Hyde by reclassifying an analyst. We used to have 3 analysts. Now we only have 2, because we requested an investment accountant in 2019 that was disapproved. There was a vacancy amongst the analysts, and in one of her last acts, Ruth Ryerson reclassified that position. I'm not throwing my predecessor under the bus because I was the co-conspirator on that. I take full responsibility for that, and I would do it again. But that cost Sam an investment analyst, but we had to have an investment accounting activity. This is the activity that reconciles all these manager statements, makes sure they agree with the holdings of the custody bank, that reconciles every fee invoice that comes in, reconciles it to the contract, and makes sure that we're getting the deal that we carefully negotiated for, and that somebody didn't flip a switch and just start charging us the rack rate, things like that. Absolutely essential. But members of the committee, there's too much work for one person. And if we lose that one person, we're in big trouble. This is key person risk. The portfolio has grown. It's $10.4 billion today, maybe 10.5. Yesterday was a pretty good day. There's just too much work for one person. This person has difficulty taking vacation. We fall behind if she's sick. And there's more work that needs to be done that just isn't getting done. So this is going to be a 2-person shop, and one person's going to be senior, hence the grade 11 and a grade 10. So we'll label the grade 11 as a manager. That's that position. And then just further over on the left, you have a member accounting manager that will be the manager over 2 sections. It'll be the manager over the supervisor of payroll. This is money out. This is the 35,000 payments that we make every month. The address changes, the bank account changes, and the deaths that occur where we have to end the benefit or shift it to another person. All that's done in the payroll section. And then you have the employer relations supervisor
Dave,
in
can I have-
that
can
section.
I just want to interrupt for a second. So this report was done in 2019, right?
Yes.
So my question is, why would you not put this together and bring it to JAC during the interim instead of bringing it to us in the middle of a budget session? So then we could have walked through section by section. We could have gone over and met with you at your offices, just kind of learn more about the whole process instead of just dumping 9 of them in our lap and saying, by God, this is what we got to have, and we're violating our fiduciary duties if we don't do it.
Mr. Chairman, I would observe that there was some board turnover in 2020, immediately after this report. We went into the pandemic. 2021, there were budget cuts. Nobody wanted to talk about adding any positions anywhere in state government. 2022, Fire Aid took all the oxygen out of the room. Thank you for your support there, by the way. I think in the end, the board needed to wrap their heads around this and have the courage to ask for it. I think in the end, just like a 2007 management report from LSO that I've got in the back here, has some interesting comments. It says it faults the retirement system for not asking for positions. I don't know if that's true. I went back and looked at every position request over the last 12 sessions, 6 supplemental sections, 6 budget sessions, going back over 3 directors. We have had some successes, and this committee has been supportive. We've won 2 positions over the last 2 cycles. As you know, we added a member benefits specialist. We added an accountant.
So you're not
But
answering.
why haven't this been brought sooner to an interim? Maybe we bring some fault to that, but it takes a long time for the board to wrap their heads around it and to frankly get the courage to ask for what we really need.
So, you know,
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, can I try to help answer the question?
I thought you were sick, Tom.
I am sick. I'm cutting off and hacking and then coming back on. No, listen, I think, Mr. Co-Chair, it's an absolutely fair question. One of the challenges we've had as a board, as a system, was our strategic planning. And I think, for some of the folks there on the committee that have been our legislative liaisons, they've seen it, where we had our governance chair turn over a few times. We had COVID. We never really got into, I would call it, a full-scale strategic planning mode. We kept sort of pushing it off. On the other side, and again, this is one of Dave's strengths to a fault. Dave will do tremendously more with less. And we have to press him really hard to sort of hear where the stress points are. And so it was literally, Mr. Co-Chair, this last strategic plan, when we went through it, we finally have now gotten our board situated with some incredibly talented new members and to get them up to date and up to speed. And so that's why now we are really coming at you with this full amount. And as I said before, I totally understand that this is a very large ask. But again, remember back in 2016 when we did ask for a large ask, and frankly, that really paid off. So I hope that answers it a bit from the board perspective.
Yeah, Mr. Co-Chair,
Go ahead, please.
thank you. I guess I have in fact heard from members of the board who came to visit with me and explain their proposed asks and the needs for this reorganization. And part of this chart was actually provided to me. So in defense of
When was that?
about 4 weeks ago.
That's
So
perfect.
I think it's unfair, and I appreciate the fact that this is why we have budget hearings. This is why these materials are prepared. This is actually the purpose for the time here, instead of duplicating efforts over and over and over again of meetings without the entire committee, of meetings with just individual legislators, but rather the entire joint appropriations committee gets to hear these requests at the same time together hear the answers to those questions together and make decisions about these requests together. And so I think it's fully appropriate to hear this now. We certainly heard a lot of that all day yesterday. No different this morning. So just for clarity on that, I have been aware of some of these requests, I think as a result of relationships with constituents and board members within my very own district. So thank you for that.
Go ahead.
I think Madam Chairman really points out the value of being, as members of this committee, being involved on an individual basis with you all and with her constituents, which really helps us have a seasoned understanding of the request. However, as you point out, Tom, educating your board on the need of this takes time. We need that time too. And even though we don't necessarily need to make a decision in October or in July or October when we have some of these in, but to know that this conversation is going on and to kind of help us get our mind around this as you guys are getting your mind around this really does have value, so that when we come to this meeting and we're getting right down there and we're trying to understand why the governor made his cuts and why you're saying you would like to have the whole package. It would have benefited us to have a little more of the background. And I appreciate Madam Chairman having more of that, but I don't. So I think that there's value in sharing this as you develop your plan. We didn't need to make the decision then, we'd make the decision now.
Mr. Co-Chairman, Jeremy Smith, if I could make a comment about that. We typically understand how the process, we do understand how the typical process goes and why that's important. And I think what our chairman alluded to was that we have some new members on our board. And it is our full intent and purpose to work with you as our, oversight committee on the legislative side to continually have those conversations and educate you as to where we are, what we're thinking, what we're doing. And our good legislative liaisons, I know, bring that information to you guys as well. It's an important job that they have to sort of bridge that communication gap. But I think what he's saying, what our chairman is saying, is we have a commitment to you to do that education in the off season, right? This is the budget ask. We try not to do things in the interim because no one really likes, in terms of budget supplemental budget asks. This is the big ask for the biennial. We try not to do that to you, understanding all of the complexities that brings monetarily. So that's why the timing of this ask, perhaps we could have done a better job last spring or this summer to kind of educate you all as to where we were and what our thinking was. But understand that we have an 11-member board that's committed to doing that on a go-forward basis regularly. So that's my last comment. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Drew.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I sit as one of the liaisons on this board, and I guess I understand your point, understand your concern. But as someone who's been sitting and listening to these meetings through the last 9 months, it has been something that's evolved to this point, and it didn't evolve to this point. This report's been there, but as far as getting the board and the conversations I've been a part of to the point where they could come is a relatively new phenomenon, and trying to get them and ferret it out. I've got to be honest with you. I have concerns about some of the pieces, some of the facets of it. You and I've talked about that. But I will say too that they've been working very diligently to try to get to a point where they've got their board, their whole team to this point. And it's something that they're coming with now. It is not like that they're springing it now. It's something that is evolved slowly, but has been achieved. And I look forward to hearing them out, and then we can have discussions amongst ourselves. And I know we've got others here that have some feelings about this and sat in on some of those meetings that can help with it too.
So, I would say that this committee has probably been the biggest supporter of retirement than any other committee in the legislature. So it just makes sense to me that if you intend to add 20% to your staff, that we should have been involved on the ground floor as you put it together, so we could kind of work out and work through it and tell you what our questions and concerns are before we show up and start cutting your budget and creating your budget. It's just a matter of process. Now, it may be that you didn't come up with this final plan until in October or November. I don't know the answer to that, but it's just a matter of good politics, number one, but also allows us to do a better job of doing our jobs, fulfilling our obligations to make sure we're spending the money in the right place at the right time. And that to hire 9 people, my guess is it's going to take you probably a year at a minimum to do that. And you're going to, if you're double stacking in some positions, you're going to hire 1 before you can hire 2. And so there's obviously going to be a implementation process of it. And so they're just, and we can help you with it and be part of the team in that. And so, and frankly, we will, and we'll continue to work in that function as we go forward. But it's just
Mr.
to get
Co-Chair,
over
I
the
would
wow.
observe that the governor's recommendation to you essentially recognizes, yeah, this has to be paced in a little bit. It will be as a practical matter anyway, because it's one thing to obtain the budget authority. Then we actually have to hire these people. And as I'm about to describe to you, there are some changes in organizational lines of authority here that are quite significant and will be impactful to the agency. And I've got to lead this thing. I'd also like to point out that it involves a lot more than just the board and the retirement system. In this room, Tricia Bach is in the back. We dumped an awful lot of load on your agency to regrade, and they did all these 9 position classifications. They did all of the reclassifications, properly reviewed every position to make sure it was in accordance with the state's compensation system and so on. We worked closely with the budget office, Jess, Kevin, Fulbert, all in the room here. This hasn't been an easy thing to put together. We're not going to present something that's half-baked. Well, we don't know what the cost of the position is because it hasn't been graded yet and so on. So there's all these moving parts that have to come together. In the end, the member accounting manager needs to be there to provide supervision over those 2 elements I just mentioned, because they're going to lose their manager in this reorganization because that person becomes the chief benefit officer and shifts to the other side. We need to pick up the pace a little bit here. So
Go ahead.
in the bottom left-hand quadrant, there are several reclassifications because we're going to reorganize the front desk. They do more now, and we're going to formalize that because they actually scan in documents, a paperless workflow system, and they wind up setting the workflow for the agency. And we would add 1 communications position. Currently, we have 1 person as our information officer. She is your webmaster. She does all the print materials, does all the newsletters, does all the customer contact surveys and so on, but it's 1 person. And when we lose that person, everything stops. We have some ability to update the website on our own, but we can't make any major changes to it. We don't have the skill set. And at times, if the financial reports are coming out, she's the person that puts those into InDesign and does the layout. If you have to contract that out, it's a delay. And we have to get our financial reports out on time because they're utilized by every local government entity. It's part of their financial statements and would put them behind if we're not accurate and timely.
So Dave,
So
we've
it's
had
key
that,
person risk.
we've had that discussion before on these positions. And what you've talked about in the past was cross-training so that doesn't happen. And I presume you're doing that already because you don't have anyone, you don't have a backup other than the cross-train. So
It's difficult to cross-train when you've had staff shortages and they are fully engaged in their duties. So we have some limited cross-training, but there's also some things that don't get done. We processed 1,700 retirements. Last month, we processed 100 retirements. if you stay in a hotel room, you get a survey, right? It's kind of annoying. So there's so much of it, but they ask you, how was your stay? What can we do better? Don't you think we should do that for those 100 retirees? What was your experience? Was the process smooth? Did you understand your benefit? Is there anything we can do better? We're not doing that.
Go ahead, clear yourself.
So can you clarify, do you have an information officer and then the communication specialist is a second employee?
We have one person now. The proposal is for two.
Okay. And more, Mr. Chairman, and then more than simply the website, is it communicating with your members?
Yes, it's putting together presentations. It's putting together our newsletters. It's putting together all of the print materials, the member handbooks, and so on. The videos that are online, the educational materials that we use. There's a lot.
So by the way, you guys do a great job of informing your retirees and your beneficiaries and your contributors. I'm one of them. And you've got a great website. I get a mailer every month. I mean, you do a good job of what you're doing now.
I think that, but there's more to do, and it's a key person risk, because when you have turnover, all that stops. Well, it doesn't all stop, but it stresses the system.
So, Mr. Co-Chairman, I think the message here is you're doing a great job, but we don't trust anything you're asking of us here today. We don't like the way you're requesting it because we're not a part of the decision making. So try to figure that one out. I'm not quite sure how you're going to navigate that, but good luck.
Finally, in the upper left-hand corner, there's a couple of reclassifications. We're going to shift one of those front desk people for more administrative support. And then there are two additional position requests that are deferred for now in the governor's recommendation to provide some additional administrative support. We've got to do a better job of codifying policies and training materials. We don't have anything like the Idaho system has. They have a 4-person quality assurance section that rigorously reviews and updates all the policies, all the procedures, does training, does testing, does customer survey follow-up, and so on. They call it the quality assurance section.
They also have, they invest their own money. I mean, it's a whole different program. And what they have, 42, how many investor personnel they have?
The investment section is organized differently, as you know. They actually contract out a lot of their work. I don't think the portfolio is nearly as simple as Mr. Maynard sometimes likes to say it. But this has nothing to do with the investment side. This has to do with the administration communication side. We don't have anything like that. I don't think we can ask for a 4-person section, but maybe we can get one in the future. That's that.
They probably have 400,000 or 1 million beneficiaries that they're working on as well.
The Idaho system is about 1.5 times our size. I know that system. I'm a member of it.
So you're getting you're double dipping, I think.
Triple dipping, because I'm a military retiree too.
Okay. All right.
From the Army, Representative Henderson, you know, we need to talk football. We don't need to talk football. We won that game. So, Mr. Chairman, just briefly, the other part of this organization or this product, there's a chart down here that I call the fishbone chart. And this is a chart developed by the consultant that says, look, organizations have all kinds of risk out there. There's all kinds of operational risk. It can be governance, it's your systems, information, it's your external factors, people, organization, policy, process. All of that contributes to organizational risk. The items here that are in bold and yellow highlight are the ones that the consultant said we have an excessive amount of. And if you notice, most of it's in the people and organization realm. Lack of career path, unclear authorities, key person dependency, just lack of adequate staff. There's some other things that contribute to it. Cumbersome procurement. In the end, I think every government agency always has a little bit of that, where you're dealing with public money. So there's some of these things that are difficult to address, and we will always have a little more risk in those areas than some other organizations. You just have to accept that. We need to work on the things that we can work. So that's the genesis of the personnel proposal, which makes up the bulk of our 24 exception requests. So, Mr. Co-Chairman, I'm prepared to start the unit by unit lay down if that's where you want us to go.
You got any questions for Dave before we start the turn page? Go ahead, Dave.
Mr. Chairman, the Wyoming retirement system is organized budgetarily with 3 major units. There's actually 5 units, but only 3 of them have any budgetary activity. We'll talk about those other 2. The first unit is the 101 unit. This is the defined administration unit. This is the unit that administers the 8 pension plans that we are charged with. The discussion on Unit 101 begins on page 21 of your budget book. Briefly, there are some membership numbers. This is the 35,000 pensioners, the 41,000 active members, the 9,500 deferred vested members, 22,000 non-vested inactive accounts but have money on deposit with us, total 106,000 accounts. We paid out $754 million in benefits last year. The average benefit's $21,000 a year. The Wyoming retirement system in this group, in this unit, is one of the largest financial institutions in the state.
So Dave, I do have a question. If you're paying out $1,700 a month, that tells me that the average beneficiary is probably a state employee for between, what, 12 to 15 years?
The average service in the public employee plan is 20.1 years of service.
And so that $1,700 a month would be what would be paid out if you were roughly a 20-year service employee? Does that make sense? That was
Yes,
my
Mr.
question.
Chairman.
Okay, thank you. So if you don't have Social Security or some other type of income, you're living in poverty.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. That's why the board's discussion on this refers to the 3-legged stool, or the 3 elements of the target: Social Security, your pension, and some sort of personal savings. Social Security, about 40% of your income; the pension, about 40%, maybe 30%. The other 20 or 30%'s got to come from personal savings. Ideally, something like our 457 deferred savings program.
Well, and it's probably a 4-legged stool, because if you're only working 20 years, that means you probably work someplace else for 15 or 20.
Right. But that would be double dipping.
Triple dip.
Triple dipping. So there are some retiree and active member trends in your book. You'll notice that 5 years ago, we had 30,000 retirees. Today, we have 35,000. That is kind of typical. We were retiring, we'll process new retirements, and then there will be some mortality, but we're gaining about 800 a year. And so over 5 years, yeah, you're up 4,000. And there are some other financial tables about the actuarial summary. I think this committee is well-versed in that. I won't spend time on it today, but those numbers are there for you. The amount of contributions from employees, from employers, the investment income. The thing that pops out of me on the investment income is just how much it jumps around. In 2016, we made $500 million. 2017, we made a full $1 billion. Then in 2018, we lost $300 million, $292 million. 2019, we made $1.4 billion. We made $1.3 billion in 2020, and $1.6 billion in 2021. And then we lost $750 million in 2022. You can see how volatile it is. So the pension system goes for an average. We are assuming an average rate of return of 6.8. We don't hit that every year. So you can see that we've done pretty well in the markets, but it's volatile.
I did have a question on that chart. Your 2022, you had 70 million in other income, which was over the roof compared to
A good part of that, Mr. Chairman, was the Fire A contributions, and it went into the Fire A plan. That was a state employer other contribution.
Okay.
Somewhat unique. Once again, thanks for your help there. When you mentioned that this committee has been supportive of the retirement system, I can't think of a better example. And then finally, there's just the funds going in, admin expenses. I'd point out that on page 24, when you look at the admin expenses on an annual basis, it's about $9 million a year. 9.4 in calendar year 2022. The portfolio moves by that much, just almost randomly during the day. The ending balance, last year, we were just under 10 billion. I think we're over 10 billion today. And those are some summary statistics. Again, this is the unit that processes the retirements and works mostly with members.
Please go ahead, Representative Larson.
Thanks, Dave. It doubles, the administrative fee doubles in 23 and 24. Is that due to?
Those are biennium, those were biennium estimates.
It says calendar year. Right, CY?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, yes, you're right. That's what it says, but yeah, that should be an estimate for the biennium.
So sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Admin
So we'd be fair to assume then that it just stays around that 9 million.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I don't know who typed that. Yes,
Me.
I do. I do. So the exception requests begin on page 25, Mr. Chairman. The first exception request is for our information technology, series hardware and software, about $245,000 total when you add up the three categories. This is a standard budget request. It's all been approved by ETS. It is 35,000 less than the previous biennium. And that's because our hardware cycle isn't quite even in terms of replacement. And frankly, prices on hardware have gone down.
So I just have, my only question is about it. You say that you're also doing some additional enhancements in your description, and I'm going, what are the enhancements that you're doing, or is that just upgrades?
The enhancements on the RAIN programming,
Correct.
I'll like to talk about that when I get to that exception request, which is the next one. Are we ready to go there?
Well, that's your language on the Series 200 hardware software.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If we move on to the top of page 26, talking your hardware replacement, any idea how many desktops, monitors, scanners, backup batteries you will be replacing? A lot of it, and I ask because most agencies will list that they're buying 42 new computers and 27 monitors and whatever it is. So we've been trying to figure out what that looks like in each office.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, Representative Walters, we have that information. Rachel, do you have that printout that Dale has that has the exact numbers of scanners, printers, and computers? Okay. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
Exception request number 2 is the RAIN programming, maintenance, and enhancements. This is $1,402,000. It's a little more than the last biennium. It's about 110,000 more, up 8.5%. This provides 707,191 hours of programming from our external programming consultants down in Houston. It amounts to about 1.5 full-time employees. The rate is $195 an hour, which ETS described as a really sweet rate. And that's
And
because we've
you're
been
right.
with them for a long time.
These are
This
some
is-
enhancements.
These are the enhanced, well, they do some security enhancements, or there's some additional security enhancements. In the past, we've adapted multi-factor authentication like you have on your bank account or so on. We did that for employers. We did that for employees. That's an example of the types of things to do. Future enhancements include more security, as well as a rather large programming effort that would allow us to provide estimated payments. This may provide an ability to provide a payment in a case of persons that's been terminated, but we haven't got their final paycheck yet, and there's some issues with the employer in doing that. If you don't handle that correctly, then that can turn into a 90-day issue between when the member leaves employment and when they draw their first retirement check. We know from experience, you get away with about 60 days because they have their final check, then they have their retirement. But if it goes to 90 days, they do it without a month of income, and that's when the phones start ringing and you will get calls. So, but you had a person that's worked for us for 20 years. We have 239 months worth of data on the person. We know pretty much what it's going to be. You could send out an estimated payment and then recalculate when that final contribution came in. That requires programming that we don't have, but it's an example of the enhancement that this programming would buy.
Okay, please proceed.
Exception request number 3, or priority number 3 is our 410 data series. This is for $395,000. This is substantially less than the previous biennium. In the previous biennium, that was $475,000. And that's because last biennium, we had a mix of physical servers and virtual servers, and we kind of had to double budget for both of those because we didn't quite know what the transition is. The transition's complete. The new system's quite a bit less expensive to operate, and it also works faster. Because if we need programming power or processing power, we just call it up. It's all virtual. And so we can process certain things like monthly interest in minutes, certainly within 30 minutes. In some cases, it was taking 6 hours prior to that. So it's cheaper and it's better. To convert all that was also an enhancement, which required some programming on the range side.
Any questions? All right,
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Gurley.
thanks. Gentlemen, I'm on this one, the priority 3, and then the last one, the 1.4 million. It says that, I'm reading on both of them. It says, ETS and the State Information Officer review these business cases and approve all the requests, each of those 2 requests. And I see Mr. Sheehan's here from ETS. So I guess the question's for you, but I'm going to look for a nod from him. But so these requests are dovetailing into their plans, ETS's plans on cybersecurity in a general way, correct?
Yeah, these programming requests or hardware requests were reviewed by ETS and they have been approved. It's a little different than the cybersecurity exception request, which we'll get to a little later, which
Okay.
is got some issues.
Thank you. I got it.
So I believe, Mr. Co-Chairman, we are on page 28 with priority number 5 overall, the 100 series labor budget for this unit.
Okay, go ahead.
I think there's been some questions on this. This is a $47,000 adjustment that occurs in this unit. It's it's about 23,000 a year. There are 3 things that happened in this unit. Back at the beginning of the budget year, we had a situation where we had 3 vacancies in member benefits. This is a 7-person section. You're down to 4. This is in the summertime, and we're processing a large number of school retirements. And one of our grade 7 specialists, our most experienced person, we had to press that person into a role as a lead and do the training for some of the new people. This was a situation we could ask the person to do more, but we actually needed to pay them more. So that person was reclassified from grade 7 to grade 8 to give us 2 leads in the position. There was a case of, we had 3 vacancies.
Before you go on, how did you go through that process?
We went through HRD, noted the new duties that had to be assigned to this person, and they agreed that it was appropriate for a grade 8. But that was outside the budget process, of course. So we take that out of Hyde. We had 3 vacancies, as I mentioned. We eventually did fill those vacancies, but they were budgeted, excuse me, they were budgeted at 90% of midpoint policy, 90% of MPP. But this was before any of the state pay plan had been implemented. So the MPP was way below market, right? So in order to have anybody accept those positions, we had to pay MPP. So each one of those positions, we paid 10% more than we were budgeted because we had to fill them at MPP. And then there was one person that was disadvantaged in the pay process because they were new and they didn't have a PMI. They were an extraordinary person. And a year later, they deserved to be closer to MPP. And we just gave them a raise to recognize that because they did not get a very big raise in the state raise. But they deserved it. And so all those situations total up to about $23,500 a year or $47,000 for the biennial.
Mr.
And
Chairman.
those are outside the state's process. So that's why it's an exception request. And the last thing is on those.
Hold on 1 second. Representative Stitt.
Mr. Chairman, Director Swindell, I take it that in the grand scheme of things, this 40-some thousand dollars isn't a very big piece of your Series 100 series. Your budget last biennium was about 11 million. Now it's gone up to 12.8 million. You got an increase of about 1.75 million. So 40-some thousand dollars in the grand scheme of things is not hugely significant. And it sounds like this was some kind of anomaly as you've described. Is that a fair characterization?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Steth, yes, I think so. These are relatively small, but we're required to report them to you.
And Mr. Chairman, as a follow-up, so I did notice that from your last biennium budget to the standard budget this year, it went up about 16% in your Series 100. The statewide average was 11%, roughly speaking. So as a broad question, what surprised me about that is since the pay raises people got tended to be for employees who were relatively behind, do you have a sense for why did your agency sort of get a 16% bump when the average statewide across the enterprise was about 11%, if you have an opinion about that?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Steth, I blame Sam. No, but it probably is it's the investment team that's driving that. The investment team's salaries were set in 2019 in a budget footnote, and then were increased by 20% in a process that was overseen by the Capital Finance and Investments Committee. So that was a multi-year bump, and those are fairly large salaries. So that would inflate the total just because of the investment team.
Yeah, and that was a bill.
It was our fault.
Representative Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you've increased the salaries beyond the amount that was appropriated. So in July of 24, these employees will see a reduction if this is in pay, if this isn't approved. And this isn't the first time the retirement system has done this. We had this same discussion in the 23-24 budget cycle. And the concern is that now we're seeing more agencies this year taking the same approach that you took 2 years ago to appropriate more funds or to pay more than what was appropriated, and then come back and ask for forgiveness, it appears. And while a modest amount, I recognize, if this trend continues, it will, over the enterprise, it will at some point become a not so modest amount that will be very difficult for the budget and the legislature to get its arms around. We had a representative that had a stern discussion with you a couple years ago about how this is an inappropriate way to go about allocating funds. And while it may be for retention and recruitment, we recognize and share those concerns. But when you continue to color outside of the lines in this regard, it becomes concerning. So are you anticipating that when if this is denied, just reducing their pay?
Mr. Co-Chairman, Representative Walters, I will not reduce their pay. I will find the money elsewhere in the budget, and those budget lines will be reduced.
Thank you.
I would also point out that in the end, when the state pay plan was implemented, because these positions were now, those three positions were closer to MPP, the adjustments were smaller, so we saved money on the back end. That makes any sense?
So, Mr. Chairman, I know the guy that was harsh on you last year. He's kind of a horse's butt. I know him pretty well. And he still feels bad about that, but, so accept my apology. But there's a process, Mr. Chairman, there's a process that in establishing what we allow for in the Series 100. And, you know, we put some pretty distinct lines in the sand on how you can do that. It's really through vacancies and adjusting on that. So I'm trying to understand the process that you went through to, you know, you talked about MPP and, you know, reaching those various thresholds, but then there's one that you say you just deserved a raise. Okay, which in my mind, we would have accounted for in a budget request, and maybe that was one that was accounted for in a budget request, but was denied. But as you implemented those, I have a hard time thinking that you didn't. I mean, did you go to the budget department or did you go to A&I? And they confirmed or verified that that was an appropriate way to do that. Would that be a fair assumption?
Mr. Co-Chairman, Representative, yes, all this went through budget, all this went through HRD. In the case of the one person, I think when the legislature was briefed on the governor's program, remember there was a two-component raise. You got a raise that was based upon your relative position in the market, and then you got a component that was performance-based, based upon your PMI rating. And we knew that there were some people that were going to be kind of disadvantaged if they were new, because they didn't have a PMI rating, and they didn't get a component, a large component there. And what are you going to do when you have a high performer and you're paying less than the market, less than MPP, and they didn't get the same raise that everybody else did? And at some point, you have to make an adjustment for that. Trish, you want to have any comments on that? I mean, you briefed all the directors on that process.
Sure, come on.
Please.
Good morning, Chairman, Co-Chair, members of the committee. My name is Patricia Bach. I'm A&I Director. I know probably enough to be dangerous about the specifics on this case. However, when you look at the comp policy, so if I as a director wanted to hire somebody in at MPP, I can do that without talking to anybody. I have to know my budget. So once that person is in that position, you cannot move that person to over MPP or adjust those pay grades without going through A&I in the state budget department. So A&I looks at the reclass, looks at the classification. We don't necessarily know what their budget is. There's a little checkbox to say whether they're in the budget of that position. And then it goes to budget. They have discussions with the director or the administrator at that time. So if you want me to go back and look specifically at these, because I don't know exactly on these positions what that process was. Generally, that's the process, but the directors are responsible for their budget.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, so Director Balk, really what I'm trying to get to today, because we have these, you know, every couple of years, this conversation, and I'm just trying to figure out how we can, we're trying to do our job, and we're trying to maintain the, how we appropriate and monitor the funds without it getting sideways on us. And so I think more than anything, I'm trying to understand and look for direction to where we can not have these kind of situations arise. But are you comfortable then? Do you feel that we seen it yesterday in the public defender, that there's, and there's a little bit of difference. We anticipated some, for example, in Department of Environmental Quality, because they come to us during the interim, says this didn't work and they had worked with you. And so we were kind of anticipating those, but we haven't heard any of these others. And so it's not that we want to oppose it, but when we just see it show up in the budget without a heads up, I'm just wondering how we can avoid having these type of.
Mr. Co-Chairman?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so my observation is we routinely allow agencies to do similar actions. You just need to ask the right members of JAC ahead of time, and then we'll approve it later.
So actually, that is not correct, Madam Co-Chair. The longer you're on JAC, the more you will learn that this is how we control the budget of the agencies and of individuals. And when agencies go outside the lines, and we kind of create the lines, and the ANI creates those lines, but quite often we see people taking positions, using the excess dollars to increase the pay scales for those individuals, and there's nothing we can do about it, and it's not in their budget. So they're actually going outside of budget authority to do it, and so it deflates the work that we do. And it also allows agencies to do things that we did not give them the authority to do it. And that's essentially, that's part of our job is to monitor their budgets and how they spend their dollars. And it's kind of a tedious process. We're trying to make it more simple, but also do it as Kevin talks about, it's a group process. There are three legs to this stool. And when you pull out our leg and then come back and ask for forgiveness, we're saying, how do we fix this process? So we're all doing this in tandem. So go ahead, Trish.
Chairman Nicholas, co-chairwoman, also Representative Larson. It is a balancing act because sometimes things happen in the middle of a year that needs to get done. However, I will tell you that the HRD administrator is adamant to the entire HR team. We cannot have agencies coming into the JAC and backing them into a corner when you have a situation. It should be a rare one. I'm not going to say it's not going to happen because some things happen that need to get done, but we try very hard along with the budget department not to back you guys into a corner. So what we tell them the majority of the time is you're going to have to go in front of the legislature and say you've done that, and you may have to say it wasn't approved. And that's a difficult situation to go back to your employee. So we try very hard, and hopefully you don't see those that often in front of the JAC. I know there have been a couple. So I would say that Kevin and Aaron do a good job trying to make sure that the agencies know that they don't want to be in a position in front of the JAC like this.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I concur with Director Bach's comments. There is not a significant number of these in the budget, and we have been transparent where they exist. And today is an example. The Guardian item yesterday was an example. Director Bach is correct. The State Budget Department does not receive all these position reclassification requests because there's checkbox in there that the director and the chief financial officer of the agency check off to say that they have the funding. It's a window of time when we're processing those, as you flow through the whole process. But what we've done is we've transparently shown you at a snapshot in time in April, when we pull the pail and we pull the budget, and then we talk to the agency, we say of your millions of dollars of compensation, there's $47,288 that wasn't priorly appropriated in your budget. And we request that they seek this conversation with the Joint Appropriations Committee.
And so is there a notification process when a request like this shows up that we can establish? So we know that, so we would have known in July, kind of like a B11 process, where you're saying that this is the request. They say they have it in their 100 series, or they're going to transfer 600 series to 100, or however they're going to accomplish it, where the money comes from.
We could develop upon the process that we've discussed with you previously, and that is the process that's in front of you today, that when we do that reconciliation in April, if there is a crossover of the Section 310, this is what it is. So that's the process that we have today. It's a policy call, whether or not you want to strengthen that or not. But we have lived up to the conversations that we've had with the Joint Appropriations Committee, and that's why you're seeing this here today.
Yeah, Mr. Co-Chairman, if I may.
Please, go ahead.
I think that's important, what Director Hibbard just said, in understanding that this is an atypical circumstance, and there is a process to address it for legislative ratification of an agency's actions to do something it wasn't previously authorized to do. Just like any other corporation, right? You have to go ahead and you need to make decisions at the time, and then the board comes back and ratifies it, or doesn't, right? And then makes it okay. This is the process of which they are to avail themselves of. And it's not a bad process, particularly in light of how painful it is. There's a strong deterrent against doing it. They're advised through A&I and the budget department that this is going to be a painful process. And then you have to come account for it. And so here we are, having an extensive conversation on a $47,000 request on a total of $11 million. The time it's taking for us to ratify this request, that money's already been spent by the expertise and time in this room. And so when we're talking about wanting our agencies to be efficient and make responsible decisions, I think we need to be mindful of that ourselves. And so if we do want a different process, we can talk about that. I'm not sure we need that level of control over those independent decisions that need to be made at the time for our directors. But rather, this is the process. And so we could choose to say, we understand you were in a tight spot out of a department of 9, you went down to 4 or 7 to 4, you lost about half of your staff doing something, and you needed to make the appropriate adjustments to keep things moving forward. We can either say okay to the $47,000 and move on to our $9.9 billion budget, or not.
Representative Larson.
I agree with the good co-chairman. This is the process, and that's really what we're doing. And what drives this nitpicking over $47,000 really is when we get to the floor of the House and we have our constituents and our House members wanting to know what kind of mischief we have going on within the agencies. And we have to be accountable in this committee to ensure them that we're being thorough in how state government manages its fiscal affairs, even if it's only $47,000. And so we're trying to avoid putting Dave in a corner or anything else. It is a process, and we do want to be right and address these anomalies. But please understand that we too, as you're accountable here, then when we move to the floor, we're accountable to our fellow legislators and to the emails I get about the evils that go on within state government and the conspiracies that exist between them and the Joint Appropriations Committee. And so we try to make sure that those lines are distinct, that we're following them, and that we understand completely why these anomalies took place and whether we should ratify them and true them up, as the good chairman pointed out in the process. But so in this conversation today, because we're going to see additional ones, we're just trying to get a feel between the state budget department, A&I, as these guys make these requests, what happened, because we may not have understand that there's this change prior today, and we are just trying to make sure that we get a handle on this ahead of time as we go through the rest of the process. So thank you for your patience, and Director Balk, we appreciate you being here.
Thank you. And Chairwoman, I would say that it is a process, and this was the process. There are a lot of things in the comp policy that talk about the exception process. It has been opened and tightened over the years. It was recently tightened when you have a position that maybe is vacant and you want to defund that position and you want to be able to fix another position, you can only go to 90% now. So if I have a position that's vacant and I have somebody who I need to hire in another position and I want to reclass it, but I don't have any money, but it's an important position and I need to get it done. I have one of those I've not done that, but I have one of those situations that we're working on now to figure out how to fund. So in the past, we were able to defund a custodial position, for example, and put that money in another position. It keeps our 100 series the same. It's flat. But my impression was that the JAC did not like that practice. So we did shore that up and said, okay, you can no longer defund past 90%. That's another barrier that a director has, that they get stuck. So we have 310, we have the defunding. So this process, whether it should maybe be a little earlier, maybe I don't disagree with that, but this is the transparent process right now. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Kevin.
I just want to clarify Representative Sis' question earlier. In fact, on page 5 of the Chapter 17 report, you'll see that there was $714,712 for the investment team driven by legislative activity. So there's the facts to your statement. It was the investment team.
And it's just an interesting time because this is the first time since I've been in the legislature and even before where we had these kind of stepped pay raises, which are a wonderful thing. We had COVID, we've got inflation on top of that. And we've got 1,700 vacancies in the state of Wyoming, even with that. And so hiring somebody at 90% or even at MPP can be incredibly difficult. And so I think we all recognize that, and we want to continue to hire quality people and pay them well. So we're not, I think it's just the process we're trying to work through, but certainly not doing your job well and helping you do it. So.
And Mr. Chairman, some of this is just timing. 90% of MPP after the state's two pay increases is a lot better than prior to that. And these vacancies were prior to that. I had to fill the positions and I could not at 90% of MPP. I had to go to MPP. So it increases the standard budget over what we were budgeted for because we were only budgeted at 90% back then. And we bring that to you and explain that situation to you.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Representative
I apologize for maybe derailing the retirement system discussion here further, but for Tricia Bach, I guess, is it the case that for all agency directors, if they want to fill a vacancy, the maximum they can offer is 90% of market policy position? Is that the position that all the agency directors are in? Or can you as an agency director say, I'm going to hire you new and I'll hire you at 100% of market policy position?
Chairman Nicholas, co-chairwoman, Representative Stith, for a new employee coming into the agency, they can hire up to MPP. And so that market policy position, they can hire to 100%. They just need an exception through HRD and through budget. So generally speaking, the reason we read that it's written that way, from what I understood, it was written a while ago. We were assuming they have the budget for MPP. We're assuming they don't have in that position the budget up to max. So they're going to be able to work some magic, move some position funding around if they want to go. And we make sure that that's solid along with budget. HRD doesn't have the budget figures. That's why it goes through budget to make sure that they're okay for that if they wanted to hire at max. That doesn't happen very often at all. Exceptions to the MPP are very rare. They do sometimes need to happen. But generally speaking, a director can hire an MPP without talking to anybody.
Mr. Chairman, just a short follow-up.
Sure.
Under our section 310, I thought we put $8 million into bringing all the vacancies up to 90% of MPP. So if I've got a vacancy, it's now funded at 90% of MPP. Doesn't that leave me short when I want to hire someone at 100% of MPP?
It
For
does,
for that particular vacancy?
Chairman Nicholas, Representative Stith, I'm going to let Kevin talk about that, but every agency's budget is a little different. Like mine might say 90%, but it might be 95%. So because somebody was paid that way before. So
Before you speak, I think someone else wants to speak.
We're okay. No, it's fine. Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
No, I can go ahead. Well, I don't want to interrupt the train of this discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Director Bach. First point is that we move heaven and earth not to find ourselves in this conversation with you about $47,000 today. That's HR, that's the state budget department, and that's the agencies. We do everything we can, but we are going to be transparent with you at the tail end of the conversation. That's clear. There is a section 310D, and it's flexibility during the biennium that allows us to fill at 90%. It's a flexibility. Section 310D is not an appropriation. The appropriation for compensation is in section 329. We will facilitate that differential with you when the time is right. That's coming. But I just want to repeat to you, section 310, subparagraph D, $8 million is flexibility, not an appropriation.
For all executive branch state agencies, only if the budget amount for all vacant positions within the general fund is at least 90% of the market value. So if all of those have been filled, then you have access.
And we have an instrument that will be presented to you for us to see to it that we have an appropriation. We lack an appropriation. You gave us that authority to have that flexibility. And that's what we're standing upon. And you heard Director Bach say that an agency cannot pull their position down below 90%. That dovetails into that conversation. So if an agency, and we are not through the biennium yet, we are not through until June 30th with all of those transactions, but I will represent to you that we know the statistics and we will be presenting you that solution in an instrument forthcoming.
Okay, Chief.
Thank you. And I'm just going to amplify on what our good budget director said, if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Please.
And that is, I think that even among directors in the executive branch, there's a misappreciation of what 310D is. 310D did not provide one single extra dollar in appropriation. It was just, it created an exception to 310 so that we could flex money enough so that anybody we hired in the rest of the biennium could be funded up to, we could move positions around, we could move money around to fund that position up to 90% so that we could have a new hire. And so that's why, and so ultimately what we will do and what we've talked about, what the good budget director has said and what he's told me is that in April, we will do an overall view of this to make sure that any agency that has sufficient vacancies and the money that otherwise would revert because of those vacancies to take care of that 90%, then we don't have to really flex that very far. But there are certain smaller agencies that may not have the vacancy savings to realize that we hired somebody at 90%, but they didn't have the money to do that. So we can flex that across the enterprise to get it from agencies that have extra vacancy savings to agencies that have insufficient vacancy savings to do that. But I think that's, you have to remember that the 310D did not provide a single extra dollar. It was, and that was the discussion. If you remember, our discussion was we could go ahead and appropriate so we could do and fund all of those. But we knew we were going to have, because we regularly have more than 1,000 vacancies in state government, there was more than enough money already appropriated to take care of whatever hires we would be able to make.
Yeah,
And
I
so-
don't remember those
So,
conversations.
so and I think that's just, it, a lot of people think that somehow that created additional money. It didn't. It just gave flex so we could move it around where we needed it.
So by the way, where's my Christmas tree?
It's in the back of my truck. I'll get it to you today. I have an extra Christmas tree. Yeah. Oh, ho, ho.
Okay. Any other further questions? Yeah, for us that like to get down on the weeds, we apologize. All right, go ahead. Please proceed, Dan.
Mr. Chairman, our time is running short here. We have another agency up. How would you like me to proceed?
Just keep going. We'll do what we gotta do.
Okay, page 29. This is priority number 11. This was add the investment accounting manager position. This is one of the ones that is recommended by the governor. This creates your investment accounting section from one person to two. We discussed that earlier.
Representative Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you go forward, Director, would you please include some words to the effect, I mean, fiduciary responsibility, right? Could you highlight how the positions that are being discussed help make sure we're not jeopardizing fiduciary responsibility?
Yeah, I think you're working through that, so go ahead.
That's exactly what this position does. This is fiduciary responsibility to reconcile your manager statements and your holdings. And it's just, we need two people, not one.
So I do have a question, and because this goes out throughout your budget. I mean, basically, you're reclassifying numerous positions. So you met with A&I and came up with a kind of a new, and you're reclassifying or moving them into a different level based upon their job description and what they're actually doing. My question is, when was the last time that retirement did that? Or are you because they're already doing those things. You're not changing the positions or are you? In other words, are you just catching up, or are you modifying the positions in order to give them, you're giving them more authorities so you can increase their position and their obligations?
Mr. Co-Chairman, members of the committee, but most of this is just future looking. We're going to change their duties. In one case, I really think they're doing those duties now. We need to recognize that. But no, we're going to reorganize folks and require them to do different things than they're doing now, if this is approved.
Okay, go ahead.
Exception request number 12 overall is to add the member accounting position. This is also recommended by the governor. This is to provide a manager over those two sections that I mentioned, because in the reorganization, they're going to lose their existing manager, and we're going to make that into the chief benefit officer.
Page 30, go ahead.
Page 31. No, page 30 on to 31, add the communication specialist position. Discussed this earlier. This is also recommended by the governor. This takes your communication section from one person to two.
I think that's a denial of the governor, page 32. Isn't that a denial? Yeah, this is the next one. That's denial. Number 14. You're right. Go ahead.
I think, well, I'm sorry. I got, no. Where am I? Yeah, priority 13. And that's the communication specialist, and the governor concurs. Priority 14 is also on page 31. That is to add a policy and coordinator position. This would strengthen our ability to do training and have consistency in policies and procedures and keep those updated. It would allow our attorney to be more efficient in doing that. Right now, the governor does not recommend that approval and wants to defer that for future requests. It is part of the board's recommended plan. Priority 16, page 32, reclassify the operations manager to a chief benefit officer position. This takes that manager, puts them into a new role, as I discussed earlier. This is the most important reclassification. And it allows us to proceed to the base structure as recommended by the consultant.
So I do have a question for Trish. So I don't recall a budget like this, where an agency is coming in and saying, we're going to reclassify all our positions. I mean, which is 5% of their agency. And they've already run it through you, but they haven't done it yet. So it's just kind of a unique process. I'm just,
Chairman Nicholas, I want to say I know enough to be dangerous about the reclass and the reorganization for retirement. My understanding is that the preliminary look at a reclass was done. It wasn't something that was, and maybe Kevin can chime in, that was completely approved at that time. This is a preliminary discussion about a reorg. My understanding, the governor's rec is 5 positions. That's what I focus on those 5 positions. Those 5 positions were sent down for a reclassification. I believe we agreed with 3 of them. We didn't agree with 2 of them. We made some adjustments and said, if you were to do this, this is what it would look like. So it's not a situation where we have done the reclasses or anything at that point. So it's very preliminary. And I focus on the governor rec, so I'm not sure about the other 4 positions.
They went through that same process, Trish. It's all proposal to get the right, but if we do this, what does it really take? What will HR, do they agree to give you the right estimate? None of it's been done. How else are we to do this? It makes perfect sense. I need a new position here. I want to modify this position, have them do it. They're different duties. And if they did that, the different duties would be a different grade, and there's a budget difference, and here it is.
so are the two positions that they disagreed with the way you classified the proposed ones, is that reflected in the governor's comments in our budget, Trish?
Chairman Nicholas, I believe when we said, for example, they wanted a 9 and we said, no, it's an 8, or they wanted an EXMT, I believe a 6, and we said it needed to be a 2.
Okay.
I believe that's what's in their request. So
Okay.
they took our advice on that and put that in the request. But again, nothing has been approved through HRD for all of this. It was just preliminary
All right.
to help them get a handle on how much it
You
would
know,
cost.
as we discussed this thing, for example, we thought that finance investment accounting person should be a grade 12. And when we discussed this with the board, we had to, I got lots of supervision. How much would this cost? Well, we said it could be a 12. Well, in the end, you do all the duties, you submit it to HRD, you have the give and take, they think it's an 11. The budget request is for an 11. So all of these numbers have gone through the mill. But again, none of it's been done. Not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for approval, proposal to go forward.
All right, please proceed.
So I'm on priority 17 on page 33 to reclassify the benefits supervisor to a benefits and disability manager. This takes that person from a grade 9 to a grade 10 because they're going to assume additional duties by taking over the entire disability retiree function, which is right now split up between member benefits and the legal department. We're going to put it in benefits. It's a benefit, and they should have primary responsibility. It will still go through legal review, but that changes the duties in that position. We would propose to do that. Priority 18 on page 34. If you create a 2-person communication team, somebody's going to be in charge. So the person that this is going to take it from a 9 to a 10 because now they're going to be a supervisor, and you just need to be clear-eyed about that. And we have been. It's a comprehensive plan. That's what this is.
That's why Tara and I get extra money for being chairs, co-chair.
Page 35, reclassify front desk specialist number 1. This would take this person from a grade 4 to a grade 6 because they're going to have expanded duties. Some of these duties are what they're doing now. Some of them we're going to add to that. You have to understand that things have changed in that realm. It used to be, maybe you could have a receptionist, all they do is answer the phone. That's not true anymore. With an automated workflow system, they're scanning in documents and they are establishing the workflow for the rest of the agency. And they really have to have an overall view of the agency, and it's a higher skill level than the budget, the position is budgeted for. Whether it would be the same incumbent or not, we'll see, but we want to structure the position to eventually require the skill level we need. That's what that is.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Director Swindell, just so I understand, on both page 32 and 33, when you're reclassifying these employees under the salaries line, for example, on page 32, where it says 62,816, that represents the amount of biennial increase in this person's salary. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Smith, that's correct.
So for this person, will they be doing essentially the same job functions they're doing today? Or would they be doing a different job functions?
They'll be doing some additional functions, but they are doing some of them today. And we're
Okay.
just underpaying for that position if we were to replace that person.
So it amounts to a $31,000 annual pay increase for that individual. Is that right?
These are all biennial amounts.
Right. So it's $62,000 annualized at 31,000 for that particular one on page
Correct.
32, right? Okay, thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
Page 36, overall priority number 20, reclassify front desk specialist number 2. This person would essentially be shifted to, the other person is shifted other duties. This person gets some expanded duties at the front desk, some of which they are doing now. And again, if we were to replace this position, we would prefer to have a higher skill level because we're going to require this person to do some different things and work more closely with the overall administration of the system, and rather than just being at the front desk. They'll be the backup front desk. Okay, on page 36, at the end of page 36 and going on to page 37, this is the cybersecurity contract request. This is $300,000. The governor does not currently recommend approval of this. The reason for this is that a lot of agencies are requesting for cybersecurity issues. And at some point, you've got to centralize this and get this under ETS. And so the governor is not recommending approval of these things, wants to ETS to take charge of this and have a central role versus agencies going off on their own. The board's a little nervous about this one. We accept that for now. When you review ETS's budget requests, I ask you to find ways to support it because we are all dependent upon it. The board's view on this is you got to remember that a public pension system like WRS is just a juicy cyber target. You have all this personal protected information and you have money. Both of those things. Those are the two targets in cyber crime, and we've got both of them. And yet you have all these vulnerabilities, some of which exist in the state system. You can hack, try to hack the state network, but you also have parts of this data that reside with our vendors, with our actuaries, with our paying agent. You have bits and pieces of our database that exist in all of our employers. It's up in Sheridan School District #1 for all of their employees, their RAIN IDs and so on. So you have all these vulnerabilities. The board's view is we don't want a cybersecurity position. We want a cybersecurity service, but we want a relationship similar to what we have with our actuaries. You know Paul Wood, you know Thomas Lyle. They have briefed this committee many times. They're at every board meeting. They're not employees, but they are valued partner consultants to review the actuarial situation of the pension plans. We want a similar relationship in the cyber world where we'd have a consultant routinely assess the system and continually assess the system. It's not a one-time thing. To regularly brief the board on what our policies were, what our vulnerabilities were, and so on.
So what do you do now? I mean, I presume that your RAIN contract and that has all the type. it's protected. But in terms of your home computers, your office, and your interconnection relationships with other entities, I mean, this is your number 21 priority. If the board was that concerned, it would be a number 2 or number 3 priority. But, so I presume that you have some confidence in what you have now.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, of course, we have some confidence. We do have a business integration manager who has some training in these matters. We work closely with ETS. We have 2 direct bill ETS bills on site. But we don't know what we don't know. And that's the concern. But I know that I talked to Tim Sheehan. They are going to provide a dashboard for agencies because part of this is just visibility and comfort level, perhaps. And maybe that's all it is. But right now, well, in the past, for example, when we got an email or an inquiry off the portal, we couldn't tell where it came from because it went through ETS. It was ETS's IP address was what you would see. We didn't know whether it came from North Dakota or North Korea. Now we can see that. They've let us have more visibility into that. And there's going to be more visibility.
Meaning
So
ETS has? Who the ETS gave you that visibility?
yes.
Yeah.
It's still not quite what it needs to be because I think that needs to get down to the user level. Right now, our business integration manager can research something and say it came from here, but it's not immediate. So we need a better dashboard, and Tim's in the process of doing that. He has modeling this after what has been done in Hawaii. Apparently, it's been pretty successful. I'm going to reach out to Tom Williams, former director of the Wyoming Retirement System, twice removed. He's still over in the Hawaii system. It'll give me great comfort if Tom thinks what they've done in Hawaii works for them. And so we'll work it for now. But the board does, I think, will accept this for now. But I do think the board is seeking some independent verification that our cybersecurity is as good as it can be for some of our unique situations. And a consultant specialized in pension systems may be the best way to go.
Senator Salazar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So is ETS telling you that they cannot fulfill the expectations that you want in the coming years as far as cybersecurity?
Well, they think they can. The board has some doubts. I'll put it that way, Mr. Chairman. We'll see. But everyone knows we need to do better in this area, and the governor does have a good proposal to strengthen ETS and give them additional resources.
Yeah, that's a time component to that you're not comfortable with it as well, I would presume.
Mr. Chairman, yes, criminals aren't waiting.
Go ahead, Co-Chair.
Yeah, Mr. Co-Chair, if I were on the board, I mean, I would feel exactly the same way. You know, and it's not out of, I mean, ETS has just gone over a major transformation. There is a plan to continue to work on cybersecurity. That is a dynamic threat that's changing all the time. And I don't think it can be, you know, underscored enough just how ripe of a target the Wyoming retirement system is. So I'm surprised the governor did not support this recommendation. I mean, my one suggestion would be, I think it's prudent to do. I mean, I feel better too. Who would want to be serving on this committee or serving on the board in the event the worst happened, right? And so how do we provide those securities and that insurance? It seems like an appropriate amount of money for that comfort level, for that confidence, and to protect our members and all of that money. So the only concern I would have is the type of contract entered into, recognizing and hoping that ETS will be able to meet all of those concerns readily. But so want to make sure that contract isn't for too long of a period of time. We commit ourselves into an ongoing obligation that may be redundant. So that's my only piece of concern.
And so to follow up on that, it seems to me if you haven't done one, what you really need is a risk analysis to know where, how, and when it's most likely to happen and whether or not you are covered in those areas, pending ETS or further upgrades to your security system. And so the question is that what you were going to do with this 300,000?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Continuing assessment. And of course, it was going to have to go through ETS. They'd have to be party to the contract, and perhaps the best way is to have them contract for it. But I've got to if we want additional services, we have to pay for them. So I need budget authority to give to ETS. Maybe it just we wrote this as a 900 series, as if we were going to contract for it. Maybe it should be Jess, would that be a 302 series? Interfund transfer? I'm not sure, but that's the concern. And of course, if we hired a consultant, they want to look at ETS. I suppose ETS would want to be involved in that.
Okay, and they're going to comment. Tim, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, Madam Chairwoman, members of the committee, T.R. Sheehan, Interim Director and CIO for ETS. So the director and I did have a conversation earlier this week. One of the main things we're after is we want to make sure we're doing a coordinated effort on our cybersecurity. And so that is part of our why we have a denial recommendation here, is to ensure that we're going forward together as one and not trying to splinter off. So we did work with—
Tim, can you speak a little slower and pull that mic a little closer?
Sure.
Thank you.
So we did work with the agency earlier this year to do an assessment through DHS CISA. And so we do have some recommendations from that report that we're working through. So we have some baseline information already. ETS also has some additional requests that we'll talk about tomorrow that I think will augment some of the services that the director is requesting. That isn't to say at some point we do want to have that independent verification. That is crucial. But we are, I believe, working towards that with some of our budget requests we have this session.
So you did a preliminary risk analysis of some sort, or some entity did for retirement?
Mr. Chairman, that's correct. So we worked with CISA, which is a cybersecurity infrastructure support agency. I always get that S wrong, but so essentially the feds came in and sat down and started doing an overview, and there are some baseline recommendations from there that our staff is working through. Many of the retirement systems that they utilize are actually behind ETS services, so we have some of that visibility. So we're prepared to assist, but that was our one of the primary reasons why we did that recommend denial, is going forward in a coordinated effort.
And so what's the timing of your efforts? If the board is anxious about it and they'd like to get it done yesterday, what's your schedule?
Mr. Chairman, one item I did offer the director is to bring the board in and actually let them look behind the curtain. And I think that's a big piece there, is to understand what we already are doing and help the board understand what that, ensure they have that comfort level. So we did talk potentially early next year, February, if I remember correctly, let them come in. I would even offer the same invitation to you all. Check out what our cybersecurity operations center looks like. We can show you some of the tools and the software that we're using and what that functionality looks like.
Okay. Any comments back on that? Or Dave?
No, Mr. Chairman, other than confirm what Director Sheehan just told you. We will have the board tour at your facility in February 2024, in the middle of the session, like 23 February.
Okay. All right, it's 10:06. So let's take, should we just try to finish you out? Keep moving? What's the? We can do our best. All right, keep going. Let's see how.
So, Mr. Chairman, we have concluded the exception request on Unit 101. We're going to go to Unit 103. 103 is the investment unit that Sam Masudi oversees. I think you're well aware of what the unit does. We have 7 investment professionals and currently 1 investment accountant in this section, plus 2 interns. The proposal, of course, is to segregate the investment accounting out of this unit. But you know what this unit does? They invest $10 billion and try to attain an average 6.8% return. And I think this committee knows that the performance rankings have been in the top decile amongst peer funds, and they've beaten the benchmarks over the last 5 years, 7 years. And it's just a tremendous turnaround from the days when we did not have an investment team, and Wyoming's results were frankly in the bottom 10%. So I think I won't spend a lot of time on what they do because we've discussed it already. I'm going to go right to the exception requests on page 43. Add the investment analyst. The governor does not currently concur with that and wants to defer that request, as we discussed earlier. But this committee is well aware. What we had was we used to have 3 analysts. We converted one to have that investment accountant. We've never been able to get it back. This is the 4th request. Priority number 8 overall was to add the operational risk officer position. Sam has already discussed this. This would provide essential middle office support to help monitor the portfolio, which is essential to achieve,
Sam,
maximum investment results and understand the portfolio on a daily basis.
Sam, if you had the option of request number 7 or number 8, and if, assuming that we're doing this incrementally, do you have a preference?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think the preference would be number 8.
Number 8?
Yeah, the reason we put the investment analyst kind of ahead of that was simply because we've asked for it before and we try to be consistent. Sometimes when you try to order things exactly, number 7, number 8, it's false precision.
Yeah.
Essentially, I don't know if it's prudent to hire another analyst if we don't have the appropriate middle and back office staff to support that. It's like we're going to add a second story, but we haven't fixed the foundation.
Well, and I might mention that we've added some back office and middle office staff to the treasurer's office over the past year or 2 or 3. And so I've asked Dawn to do a comparison of what we've done for them so we can kind of overlay it with you. And if you would do that same process, Sam, and you can just shoot us an email on what your thoughts are on it, just so we get your feedback on it. Okay? All right, please proceed.
Page 45 was to add the investment in operations coordinator. That position has been described. This is the, again, part of the middle and back office staff to support the investment team. The governor recommends approval. Priority number 10 is on page 46. This is the add to the investment office support specialist, further back office staff. For now, the governor recommends deferral.
Go ahead.
On page 47, this is a investment document management service. This is a small request for $40,000, $20,000 per year. I'm starting to regret putting this one in. It has gotten balled up. What this is a document retrieval service. When you have 60 investment managers pursuing 90 strategies, we get documents every day. We get statements, fee invoices, tax identification numbers, stuff sometimes that refers to the European Union that we don't really care about or whatever. But they don't send this stuff to you anymore. It's just like your personal life. No one sends you a statement. They say your statement's available. Log in and go get it. And now you have to have a multi-factor authentication to go get it. It's a pain. Just imagine doing that every day for this many accounts. Well, every institutional investor has this problem, and there are services that have been developed to solve this problem. Now the managers all send their documents to a central repository, and you have a contract with the central repository. You log into the repository to draw your documents for the day or to see what's there. We've test-driven a couple of systems. There's a couple of them we like better than others, but all it's just greatly efficient, so our analysts aren't spending time logging in. Instead, they're actually looking at the documents. It costs a little bit of money to do this, about $20,000 a year is the quote. But this has kind of gotten balled up into whether this is an IT service and whether ETS needed to provide an approval number on it. We didn't regard it as an ETS thing. It's just a subscription, we thought. Well, turns out not to be the case. There's some concern that ETS needs to review this, and therefore it is denied. The budget isn't really important. It's only 40,000. I put it in there because we're having to take so many things out of hide that if you have a chance and you're adding something, let's try to protect the hide. That was my thought. That was my doing. But that's what this is. And right now, because of the confusion over what it really is, it is denied.
Okay, go on.
Mr. Chairman, that concludes the investment unit. I'm going to go to the next unit, which is the 6501 unit. Its discussion begins on page 61. This is your deferred compensation management unit. This is the unit that manages an oversight program with about $1 billion in savings. We have about 26,000 active accounts with 16,000 members saving in the 457 plan. This is the unit that oversees all that. The exception requests begin on page 63. This is the telecommunication services. It's $11,000. That's $9,000 less than the last biennium where the request was $20,000. And that's because we've cut telephone lines and the rates have gone down and the usage has gone down because we Zoom a lot more stuff.
Okay, go ahead.
The next exception request is it's number 6 overall, 100 series balance labor budget, page 64. Mr. Chairman, I have to report to you another personnel situation. This is for the manager of this section. In the 2021 budget and all previous budgets, this position was a grade 12 position. We thought that we could save some money when it became vacant and we could fill this at a grade 11. And that's what it was budgeted at in the 2023 budget. We failed. When we competed this position at grade 11, we didn't get very many applicants, and the applicants did not have the skill and capabilities that we needed for this position to manage this federally regulated program at a Treasury and to adapt for it. So we took a step back. We ended the recruitment. We took it to HRD. What should we do? In the end, the decision was we really needed to go back to a grade 12. But we weren't budgeted for that. It was regraded as a grade 12. We filled it at a grade 12, but now we have filled it at a position higher than was originally budgeted. Although it's the same grade 12 budget that we had in the 2021 budget. That's the story.
Anyone want to have that discussion again? All right, go ahead.
Exception request number 15, priority 15 overall, is on the page, bottom of page 64, add a deferred compensation specialist. This is not a new body. This is a conversion of a contract person that we've had for 8 years. This person works for the record keeper in Power. They do an excellent job. She's a great person, but she's not a state employee, and therefore she is prohibited from doing some things that the rest of the section can do and that we actually need her to do.
Is that a
He
rule?
cannot approve a distribution.
Is that a rule or reg or?
This is it's actually, it's partly Treasury regulation from the federal government, and it's also part of our contract with Empower. The plan sponsor ultimately has to assume responsibility for approving a distribution. You can only take money out of your 457 account if you've been terminated. Who decides and who takes the responsibility for saying, yes, this person's been terminated, and yes, the tax situation's being reported correctly. They're either under age 59 and a half or they're over. So it's either a taxable event or it's not. There's either a penalty or it's not. The plan sponsor is responsible for certifying that.
But then, I mean.
And so the record keeper employee cannot do that.
So that just means she turns around and to say, Dave, can we do this? And you say yes.
It has to go to somebody else. She can't do it, but there's calls coming in, and this person just isn't as effective as it could be if it was a state employee. The money would be about the same.
So
we could save money in a contract, make it into a state employee, and the person could do more.
So when you say the money would be about the same, you can't tell by reading your description. You've got 153,000 a biennium. You say you spend about 100,000 per year. So the way that the inference is that you're actually going to save money by having this, but so.
We might save money. It's a little difficult to save. I didn't want to advertise that I would save money if I couldn't prove it to you, because the contract with Empower is kind of a blended contract. It includes this person, it includes this, and includes this, and there's a bottom line price. But I think, and we don't know exactly what the adjustment would be, but I think, yes, we would save enough money in a contract renegotiation to pay for the position.
Kevin, is there a particular reason why the governor denied this? We know.
Mr. Chairman, we're sensitive to when an agency would like to convert an AWAC to a full-time position. In fact, I encourage it. I encourage it to the extent because normally these are younger individuals and they actually do contribute to the retirement plan. But what we are sensitive to is that why are you asking for an increase as large as it is for a position that you're currently funding? So there's a question inside of there that it doesn't make sense to us.
So what that means is we need to see better numbers, I presume. Is that
Mr.
correct?
Chairman, I think what we need to do is to look at that exactly and say, this is what they're currently doing with their AWAC position. This is the funding that they have. And then what is the true differential on the request so that we get it right?
Could you provide that to us?
Mr. Chairman, I think we can ask Empower to say, all right, if we delete that part of the contract, are you willing to renegotiate the contract with the
For
price?
the other components? Yeah.
I'll try to get a hard number for you and get it to you before your budget markup in January.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Go
as
ahead.
in all things, that we would have to get the governor, the chief executive, to agree that this is now a change in his decision. Don't want to step out in front of that.
Well, that's fine, but we don't care about the governor as necessarily. So. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I guess that was my question. I was trying to reconcile the 100,000. Does that then shift over? I think asking the same questions we all are. So I think you'll provide that information. Thank you.
Okay, next.
Mr. Chairman, there are only two more units to go through, and these are pretty simple. There is on page 53 and page 58. I need to go back a little bit as we skip these for a good reason. We have two units that exist for the Game and Fish Department and for Highway Patrol to provide ad hoc COLAs
So
for
can I
members that were.
Can I interrupt? Does anyone have any questions on those? I think we're good with them.
Okay. So it's just a reduction because there's fewer people
Yeah.
involved.
Okay.
Annual event.
Anything else? For the director? All right, see, we can't get it done very quickly. All right, Sam, thank you. Dave, thank you. Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
I'd like to state that we have every confidence in the board and the staff for doing a great job with WRS. I talked to a lot of retirees who are very impressed with what you're doing now. In the past, they haven't been as impressed, but they're impressed now with how you're investing and your results, I would say. So anyway, we have a system set up to do that, and is set up by the legislature a long time ago to set up the boards and those kind of things. And then we put good people on those boards. They hire good staff people. We've got a good system here in Wyoming, and you guys are part of it, and I want to tell you that. I think the way to get these detailed information that we've heard today is to contact the staff and maybe board members, if you know board members, and have them inform you, which they're happy to do and do a great job of it. So I have every confidence we're on the right track here, and we're not out of line, and the system is working quite nicely. So thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to express my appreciation to ETS, HRD, the Budget Department, everybody else who helped put this together. We put a lot of work on that. I also want to express my appreciation to this committee. This is a great committee. We're going to be back on 12 January to also discuss some more proposed legislation. Very wise to delete that. from this discussion, just imagine. Don, I want to mention on the one bill on the ADC, I don't know which of your staff drafted that bill, but they did a great job. There's only a few little things that we have on suggesting for it. It's a very competent piece of legislation and a very complicated topic that this committee has been willing to wade into. I'm just so appreciative of the relationship.
So
Thank
Dave,
you very much. Happy holidays.
if you have those comments, if you can provide them to us beforehand, so we can kind of see what they are and maybe we can expedite the, when we do the bill review.
Those comments are in your materials.
Okay.
They're already in your packet for 12 January. There's a memo there. We may replace it with a little more refined stuff because I had to whip that out pretty quick myself. The actuaries may have a few more comments, but that material's already provided to you. It's mostly how are you going to define normal cost? I
So,
want to
and-
use
and
the
to
language
comment
that
on-
we have in our report.
On the
please.
good senator's comments, that I was the liaison to retirement for 8 years. And I just enjoyed the heck out of it. We went from the bottom quartile to the top in that period of time. And a lot of it has to do with Sam and Dave and the predecessors, but a lot of that has to do with this committee. Because we're the ones that help restructure and get payments done and all those things. And so it's been a nice partnership and it's, we're just.
But Mr. Co-Chairman, that is wonderful. I too was fortunate enough to serve as a liaison to the Retirement System Board, and that was a wonderful opportunity for me and one I greatly valued. And want to thank the co-chair and the members of this committee that worked so hard to turn retirement around and to know that it is on the right trajectory. And so maybe we can let hands off the wheel a little bit at this point.
Well,
Thank
Wish
you,
everybody
Director.
happy
You know,
wish
actually-
everybody
Thank you.
happy holidays. I apologize to
Yeah.
the Wildlife and Natural Trust. We put everybody behind schedule.
Okay, we'll stand on recess till 10:35. Okay. Welcome, Bob. Good to see you.
Morning, Mr. Chairman. Good to be here.
So Bob's about a snowball away from my house, and so although I'm below him, so it's easier for him to reach my house than for me to reach his house.
Correct. And,
Yeah.
and I don't drive in the deep snow, tear up my truck.
That's true.
Yeah, right.
All right, please proceed.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, Madam Co-Chair, members of the committee. I think we can make this fairly quick. We don't have a lot of requests, but I'd like to introduce Rory Horsley from the Budget Office, who's our support, and Barb Wallace, who is our budget analyst, and then Hillary Wasserberger, who rounds out the entirety of our personnel. So the entire agency is here before you today, myself and Hillary being that entire agency. I think the quickest way to do this, with your permission.
You know, Wassenberger is kind of a dirty name around here.
Well, it depends on where you are.
Yeah.
If we go to page 8, all of the exception requests are on that page, and I can walk through each one, and if there are questions, be happy to answer them. The first is an admin and personnel. It's $1,200. That's the result of Hillary was hired in April to replace my long-term previous grants manager, Robin Haynes, who you all remember. Robin retired. We had asked that that position move over laterally, that it be hired at the same amount, but we were in the middle of the process with the pay raises and the compensation. And when it was classified, it came back at $40 a month difference. So this is a budget authorization to reflect what the actual salary is. That's the number one. So if people have questions, I'd be happy to address that.
Go ahead. Please proceed.
Okay. The second priority is the admin IT. This is the standard replacement of a computer. We follow the ETS recommendations. I think it's 3 years or 4. This is replacing one of those in this biennium. It's just a standard procedure. Again, I don't think that's anything that's unexpected or untoward.
Go ahead.
Third, the number 3 and actually 3, 5, and 6 are all budget authorization. And as I have said before, when I've appeared before this committee, one of the things that frustrates us is having to go run through the B11 process to do what we're charged by statute to do. So was very pleased this year when a lot of agencies were asked to bring your budget authorization into line with what you actually do. And that's what this does. That 4.6 in admin projects puts us at where our spending is. That's on an average over the last several years. The Rocky Mountain Power one, that is, as you'll recall from last year, an agreement that we did with the BLM to manage that mitigation account. That has expedited that process significantly. I think it's improved it. But the budget authorization there is to spend the money that's in the account and get that cleared out. Likewise, the Encana Oil and Gas, that program will be ended this year. We're down now, I think there's only about $40,000 left in that account. When it zeroes out, it's done. And so this one this is authorization to clean that up and be done with that. That is the exception request for the agency, Mr. Chairman, Madam Co-Chair. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. And then I have one other request of you.
Any questions for Bob? Go ahead.
Bob, would you just remind me on the,
Sorry.
would you just remind me on the Encana, was that Pinedale or Pavilion?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, that was the Encana, the Jonah project.
Jonah.
So it was Pinedale.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
Okay.
The request, Mr. Chairman of the committee, as you recall, some years ago, certainly Representative Larson will, because he sat on our select committee. We asked for the ability to recommend back to the JAC to transfer money between the income account and the trust account. The trust account at this point is right at $200 million. That is a threshold the treasurer uses for investment purposes. The board met Monday in Lander. and are requesting that we move 2 million from the income account into the trust account. We have a surplus in the income account. It's not exorbitant, but there's enough there to do that at this point in time. That'll bring us over that 200 million threshold. I think it's good fiduciary. I think it's responsible. I think it's something that improves our ability in investment earnings. So we ask for that. Normally, I believe that's done as a footnote. And I've talked to Kevin and Don, so they know it's there. But as we go through, I think our request would be that we go ahead and transfer that money from the one account to the other.
So Don, you've got that on our account? Okay. Sounds good. You can do that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Can we make it 2.5?
Sorry?
Can we make it 2.5?
I think it would be, Mr. Chairman, there would be a great opportunity for some matching funds from JAC to make that 2.5.
Don, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, just while the director is here, the continuation of the Rocky Mountain Power account, that will also need to be recontinued. It was created in last biennium's budget. Unfortunately, there is no statute governing that, so the account lapses in the absence of language to the contrary.
Okay, and then how long will that last?
It will only last 2 years, so it might be worth visiting about whether this account will lapse at the end of 2026, or whether there would be a need to have a more permanent authorization for that account.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate that. The intent is to have that money spent. That money is mitigation money. It's not supposed to sit in an account. It's supposed to go out, and all of the money that is in there is currently already been contracted. My expectation is that those contracts will be completed within that time frame. However, just so you're aware, there are other components to that power line that may choose to utilize this option. So in 2 years, if Gateway South, Gateway West has additional mitigation they want us to handle, we would need to ask for that reauthorization. But I don't believe, to Mr. Richards' point, I don't believe this should ever be authorized as a permanent account, because it's meant to be spent out just like Encana was.
Does that answer your question, Don? Okay. Anything else? Any further questions for Bob? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for hanging around and enjoying the morning.
Well, I'm nearing retirement age. It was worth being here.
Yeah. Boom. Welcome, Trish. We'll see. Please proceed.
Thank you very much, Chairman Nicholas, Co-Chairwoman Nethercott, and members of the committee. My name is Patricia Bach. I'm the A&I Director. I'm here to present our budget for this year, or for the biennium. And I'm hopeful that we'll be able to kind of go through fairly quickly as well. A lot of our exception requests are funding switches or net to zero things. So we'll be able to go through those pretty quickly, even though it looks like an extensive list. I also wanted to let you know that there is probably a new document that you have. It's the TRP breakdown for each division. Hopefully that helps a little bit with some of the questions on exactly what we're looking at for TRP. So if you'd like, I think most everybody here knows what A&I does. We're a very diverse agency. We make sure the buildings are nice and clean. We also have, for example, Dr. Liu at economic analysis. And so we have a wide variety in A&I. And I think most of you are aware of that. I don't necessarily, I think, have to go through the state of the agency and kind of descriptions, but I would like to point out a few things that we're doing that.
Could you pull the mic a little
Yes.
closer?
I will. Thank you.
Sure, go ahead.
A few of the challenges we have, some of the successes, very, very few. There's extensive. Our employees do a lot of really good work, and I would love to be able to outline all of those, but generally speaking, that some of the challenges we have, the enterprise has as well. One of the biggest is the succession planning due to anticipated retirements in staff and the ability to retain top applicants. One of the things we're doing to help with that is we are trying to reinstitute the WISE training, and some of you have been here for a while. That's the supervisor training. We used to have that in person 2 days a week, or 2 days of training, and then we had Wiser, so there was like a step. So we are attempting to, with HR consolidation, get that back, along with training for telework. So supervisors sometimes have a hard time transitioning between in-person folks and supervising folks that are teleworking full-time or part-time. We are also trying to standardize agency forms, processes, and systems. And in working with ETS for the past year, I think I have gained quite a bit of knowledge on why we need to get those systems consistent across the enterprise. So that's another thing we're working on with ETS. Two issues that have happened in A&I, and I'm pretty sure that JAC, some of you know, Ralph is retiring this year. He's retiring next week, along with Pam Unruh. We have made a hire, in-state hire. It's a very niche position. It's not easy to find somebody who can step into that role.
How do you replace Ralph?
Right. How do you replace Ralph? He has been here for a long time, and he has an incredible amount of knowledge, and we're sad to see him go, but he is looking forward to retirement. We have Lori Brandt coming in. Some of you may recognize that name. She was with the PSC and with Health, so we're excited about that. We also, Jamie Marcus went to UW, stole him from us. He had been with the library for, I think, almost 30 years, high 20s. So that was a bittersweet loss. It was a good opportunity for him, and he looks forward. We still are in contact. So we are in the process of recruiting for the Wyoming State Librarian. Right now, Abby Beavers is the interim. She has also been with the library for a while. She will also apply for that position. So we'll see how that goes in the next couple weeks in the beginning of the year. So those are the challenges that we have. In the director's office, the main thing I wanted to focus on was the Capital Information Office being opened up in coordination with the docents, and that has gone very well. That entails also working Saturdays, and we had a discussion about that during the interim. We also have my deputy director, which is sitting behind me, and I forgot to do introductions. I apologize. Roy Horsley, who you all know, as CFO for A&I and many, many other agencies. And then we have Andrew Coleman on the end there for a discussion when we get to the General Services Division. He's the administrator. So Russ is sitting behind me. He was appointed by Governor Gordon to the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. And I had to have that written out because I always just call it IJA. So he's been on that team for about a year and helping coordinate the efforts of the executive branch. So that's taken up a good amount of time and learning, and he's enjoying that. We have had multiple requests from 2 more agencies for Rory to be able to do their accounting. It makes sense for some small agencies to come under A&I for accounting, and more and more often we're getting requests for that. So we have quite a few. That was the Gaming Commission, or I'm sorry, the Laramie County District Attorney's Office and the Board of Nursing. So we also had a request from the governor and from state budget to have a responsibility for the Wyoming Gaming Commission, revenue tracking and reporting. So we're doing that as well. So right now Rory has her hands full with quite a few agencies, and she has ANI, 20 boards, the governor's office, the governor's residence, Professional Teacher Standard Board, Minor Hospital Board, Gaming Commission, Wildlife and Natural Resource Trust, Sports Combat Commission, Board of Medicine, Board of Nursing, State Budget Department, Laramie County DA, and the Environmental Quality Council. So although she's up here for ANI, which is hard enough, they do a great job in working with all the other agencies to help consistent CFO responsibilities through the small agencies. General Services Division, I just want to point out a couple things. We have Facility Operations section provided daily custodial and groundkeeping services for state-owned buildings in Cheyenne, totaling over 2 million square feet, interior square feet. And then you also have trades that provides 2.2 million, or services for 2.2 million interior square feet as well. That has gone up quite a bit over the last few years. That's one of the reasons why we're spread a little bit thin, and you'll see a little bit further in the exception request where we're asking for 3 positions. We also completed our first full year of operation of the Thyra Thompson building. That has gone very well. If you'll remember, we originally thought we might contract for some work our work up there. It has worked out really well to have those positions up there, especially with some of the issues that come up in a building of that size. And we've also taken over operation of the newly acquired State Trails building in Lander. That belongs with State Parks and Cultural Resources. That's fairly new. Leasing, I'm very proud of how far we've come in our leasing program. And I always look at Senator Guru when we talk about leasing. We have made some really good hires, a little bit of, changing around how we do leasing. They have done a great job. We are no longer scrambling at the end when leases are coming up to make sure we get those done under the wire. We're getting them done 6 months in advance. We're making sure that we're negotiating good prices. So I'm very proud of the leasing department and what they were able to accomplish. We moved the retirement system into the Hanson building recently, and then just finished the DFS move to the Airport Parkway. I don't know what we're calling that building. I call it the Airport Parkway building. It's on airport grounds. So they are over there. Seems to be going well. There were only a couple options for them, and this was the best one. And I think that they're fairly happy with it. I'm sure Director Schmidt will let you know how that's going too. The Human Resources Division, I think it feels like we talk about them a lot, and we have in the last couple of years. So I wanted to make sure that everybody knew one of the things in our budget is the last of the consolidation requests that we had. So that's the last one, and you'll see that a little bit further. Because of the consolidation, we have been able to institute the Consolidated Strategy and Compliance Group. So this is grievance discipline, trained investigators, safety, working with the workers' comp division, working with unemployment division. We have a new safety manager, also in state from DFS, Mel Warren. I'm sure many of you know who she is. She has come over to help us with that division too. So HRD has done a lot. We are now working on that division and then updating training for everybody. So it's a slow process, but we're getting into that. Everything that is in our statute that we're supposed to be doing, we're making sure that we are compliant with. One of the things that we talk about a lot as well is morale. The compensation adjustments, as the chairman discussed, were, I don't want to say they were unheard of, but they were unheard of. To have that 2 years in a row, if you've been here a while, has done a lot of good for not only the agencies, but the employees. I hear about it all the time, how much they appreciate that work. We have directors who are all working towards the morale issues, because we may know that, yes, getting paid better is always good. But you need to like where you work, and you need to like the people you work with and get along. And that morale is a big issue. So we're working in the work-life balance and morale issues for state employees. We also implemented a statewide referral bonus program. I believe it's $250 for anybody who recommends a friend or family member to come work for the state. That seems to be going quite well. Lastly, we launched the recruiting performance pseudo HRIS system. It is not a true HRIS system, but it is very close, and we were able to do that nearly with the funds we had. You'll see a request, and that's one of our bigger requests, is the NeoGov system. The Efficiency Commission had said that the HRS system was very important to get in with the state of Wyoming, and we were able to do that through going out for RFP. Our halogen system was going to go up exponentially this year. So when we went out, we had NeoGov for recruitment. Now we have them also for performance, and we were able to add a bunch of modules on onboarding and essentially an HRIS system that we were able to put together. So, and it works very well with the auditor's office. So,
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, while we're on the conversation of the pay increases that were allocated last year, my question is for contract staff, 900, 600 series
Sure.
type staff. Energy Authority received raises, the ORC received raises, yet the Seed Lab in Powell through the Department of Ag did not receive pay increases. The public health nurses that are on contract in the counties did not receive raises. So what was the test for how you allocated pay raises for those type of positions that are more in the 600 or 900 series versus the 100 series throughout various agencies?
Chairman Nicholas, they were not included. Long story short, the contract folks were not included in the employee pay raises. So if you were a 900 series contract, you negotiated a contract, for example, an attorney to testify in a case. You negotiated that contract, that's what your contract was. So that negotiation will come around again, and they have the opportunity to negotiate then as well.
I'm a little confused now then, because
Okay.
the Energy Authority is a 900 series, and those employees did receive raises as contract, they're considered contract employees, so.
I think we're
Right.
talking about two separate things. When I talk about a 900 series contract, that's a personal services contract. So I'm going to let Kevin take it.
Okay, just trying to figure out how
Sure.
that was allocated.
Sure.
Mr. Chairman, you did approve, Joint Appropriations Committee, those agencies that are a little bit different, quasi relationships. The Energy Authority, Public Television, Judicial Contacts, the Business Council were included, Enhanced Oil Recovery, University of Wyoming Community Colleges. Those are all included, and that money would be B11'd over them, and then they make those allocations. But it's in the appropriation.
So then, for example, Mr. Chairman, for example, the folks in the Seed Lab through the Department of Ag that are 600 series didn't receive any pay increases. How?
believe that-
Because we didn't spell it out that they needed it, or?
I believe that was the example that Director Bach provided to you, that it was a contract position, and those are done through that process. I can use the brand inspectors, for example. We know that they modified their contracts for their compensation. So there's two things going on. There's the quasi agencies that we did, and we will B11, and there's the contract negotiation aspect of it that would be in the 900 series.
Representative Larson?
So does that then apply to the public health nurses with that agreement with the counties as well, or did they get a rate adjustment? I just want to make sure that I I'm not sure how accurate I am on this, that there's concern there that didn't keep pace with what the county's doing.
Ms. Legursky or Mr. Hibbard?
I believe the public health nurses were included in the compensation through the Department of Health. I know that the nurses were included.
Mr. Chairman or Madam Chairman.
Representative Walters?
What Representative Larson's referencing is there's 5 counties that offer public health nursing through the county model versus through the state. And those nurses get a different level of pay, partially state, partially county. And that, my understanding is they were not included in any of the pay increases.
That may well be true, and I can follow up with Director Johansson on that relationship with the county and the state piece of it. But in the Department of Health, the nurses were facilitated.
All right, so you're going to follow up, Representative Larson?
Just another question, as you talked about Rory's positions and taking on additional responsibilities for different agencies, I would guess that's kind of on an enterprise model, and they help cover the cost of her doing that.
Director Bach?
Madam Chairwoman, Representative Larson, yes, it goes through SWICAP. Right? Yeah.
All right, Director, please continue.
Thank you. So kind of skirting through the strategies, since I became director, we've been trying to improve each year with ANI. As a control agency, you might know that sometimes we get a lot of pushback or frustration with ANI. Control agencies are like that. And so we try very hard to not say no, but we say, not no, but you can do it this way, and this way you can do it properly. So we try very hard each year to improve ANI's vision each year. We focus on certain areas. We've focused on, obviously, comp. We focused on HRD. We focused on leasing specifically. So we continue to do that. We hope we do it well. And I do believe that we have gotten to the point where we feel like we have some momentum going forward at ANI. So now to our exception request. It is page 22, if that's okay, or would you rather me go through page 1? Okay. So page 22 shows our exception requests. As you can see there, it looks like 15. There's really a lot of funding switches, B11, getting rid of some B11s. So we'll go through those, and hopefully we can go through those fairly quickly. So if you start on page 25, 26, that's our priority number 4 in the director's office under operations. That's our TRP request, and you should have an additional sheet in there regarding our TRP. We follow what ETS recommends. And that request is $458,320 of general funds. That includes peripherals and software updates like Adobe. That's all in the TRP for the director's office. And if you would like a breakdown, like I said, you should have that there.
Madam Chairman, apologies for the interruption. On the governor's recommendation on this one, it indicates that the governor further recommends the TRP be placed in the units where they will be delivered and can be cost allocated. I just want to be clear for our purposes. Do you want us to incorporate your handout, which is handout number 75 for the committee, into the budget bill by unit, or what is the direction there?
Director Bach?
Madam Chairwoman, that would be helpful. Mr. Richards, I think that would be fine.
All right, please continue. Representative Larson?
If you'd allow me to follow with Mr. Richards. Mr. Richards, is there an easier way to do it?
Madam Chairman, Representative, we asked this kind of in advance of the governor's letter on enterprise inflation as well. We will need more information than just the handout because the funding splits also need to be by unit, by series, and that is not included in the handout. It is always easier if the agency populates the budget by unit themselves, but we can build that in.
Madam Chairwoman, the CFO, Roy Horsley, said she can work with Dawn to make sure that happens quickly. Thank you. Priority 7 is a funding switch. There's a position currently funded by various professional licensing boards. As you know, A&I has 20 boards, and is the only position in the director's office funded that way. So this is a funding switch, and I call it net to zero, but it's probably not the true term. It's $214,440 as a funding switch from other funds to general funds, and then it would be caught in the SWICAP going forward. Madam Chairwoman, yes, that would be SWICAP to the boards.
Co-Chairman Nichols will continue.
Okay, thank you. Priority number.
Important phone call with Q.
Priority number 9, cell phone funding. This is a $3,129 request for cell phones for the public information officer, executive assistant, and the CFO. They're all using state phones, state cell phones, and not actual desk phones. So it's kind of a switch. It's a lot easier for people who are teleworking to be able to have a cell phone from the state. So that is our ask for the cell phone funding.
Okay, go ahead.
Priority number 11, we've had this a couple years. This is an increase in our SARA system, which is our accounting system. It's $3,000 for the maintenance only. There's no increase in the actual bulk of the system. Hosting, there's no increase in hosting. The vendor is requesting this 4% increase. ATS recommended that most agencies will probably see a 6.5, so they're slightly under that. Priority number 12, 400 series funding. This is to correct an error in the director's office 400 series budget from the current biennium. With all of the money that was moving around during the HR consolidation, this is a fix here. The telephone or the telecom charges associated with the HRD centralization were transferred out of the director's office and into HRD 400 series twice in building the BFY 23 budget. So this is a correction on our part.
Okay.
And you'll see that further down for the net to zero. So we're on to professional licensing boards, and this is their TRP request. It's $12,003. Also includes the peripherals and software. We follow the recommendation of ETS, so that should be in your sheet as well.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, looking at the table on page 36, it appears these professional licensing boards have operated somewhat in a deficit here at the end of November, the end of the year. Is there a need to increase their fees, or do we need to have the boards paying in a more timely manner?
Chairman Nicholas, Representative Walters, I'm going to turn that over to Roy Horsley.
Chairman, Madam Co-Chairwoman, members of the committee, Rory Horsley, CFO. The reason for the deficit there is just due to the billing. The billing is always done a month in arrears. So the services are incurred, the payroll expenses incurred in the board office, and then we turn around and bill the licensing boards for that recovery the following month. So it will true itself up.
Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you. Chairman, we are on to General Services Division. Under the procurement unit, we don't have any exception requests at this time. The same for surplus property, that's page 43. Risk management is on page 47 and 48. We delivered to the co-chairs the actuarial report, some of which we don't want to have to be public. There's obviously cases in there. And so hopefully if you have the time to peruse that, it's a lengthy report. Currently in the pool, as of yesterday, I don't know if we have an updated number from this morning, was 25,900,000. So just almost 26 million. This request is to add, and we talked about this last year, that we were going to come forward with a $5 million ongoing request. Wyoming Statute 114-105 requires the risk management section to prepare a budget based on economically and actuarially sound principles. You have a copy of that in your documents. I apologize. We just sent that over yesterday. So I know you didn't have a chance to read it all and know exactly what they had to say. The risk management section of the General Service Division is requesting this funding to keep up with continuing increases in program costs and maintain self-insurance pool, the risk pool, at a sound level. Insurance premiums, I think you're all well aware, have dramatically increased nationwide due in part to COVID-19, natural disasters, civil unrest, social inflation, and large court verdicts. So if you don't know, we also have all the peace officers in the state. If they're sued, they come out of the risk pool. So those are some of the cases you'll see in the actuarial report as well. Our insurance companies started paying out more money than anticipated in claims, and they began to raise premiums to offset that. So that's where we are with the $5 million.
Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you just, maybe in a very rudimentary sense, help me understand what the risk management pool is?
Sure.
The intended purpose of it doesn't go into that real good. I know it's protection of our assets, but just clarify.
Chairman Nicholas, Representative Larson, sure. I almost want to hand it down to Andrew because I focus a lot on the legal side of it because that's what I was used to working in at the AG's office. So you do a lot of the legal cases. That's who pays the bill, is risk management. So if there is a settlement or if there is a verdict, risk pays the bill if they're working if they're considered to be a state actor. So, but there's a lot more to it there. And I'll transfer it over to Andrew so he can give you a little more of a rundown.
Chairman, Madam
Go ahead,
Chairman. The purposes that we have for the risk pool include the litigation when we get sued. Sometimes those things can be for civil rights lawsuits all the way to someone gets run into by a snowplow. Similarly, our risk pool, though, and our staff also go to recover damage to state property. So if someone runs into the snowplow, we will try to go pursue their insurance. But we pay for settlements, we pay for claims for property damage. We also maintain insurance policies to help us in the event of issues, including things like cybersecurity issues that would affect the state. So we have property insurance. Those are kind of a broad range of some of the ideas that they have to deal with. I think that
Thank you.
covers the gap.
Mr. Chairman.
So the answer is you're comfortable with 5 million? Is that going to be enough?
Chairman Nicholas, in looking at the actuarial report, talking with the risk manager and the GSD administrator, we think $5 million would be appropriate ongoing. And then we can evaluate it too as we go.
So I don't always have confidence in actuarials. I mean, I take it you've done a time risk analysis when you have 2 or 3 catastrophic issues that you feel comfortable with.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, we do feel comfortable with the 5 million. However, I would always say, just as I do with EGI and I watch those reserve levels, that if something were to be would dramatically change. For example, prior to 2019 to now, that would be something we would bring to you and say, we have an issue, which is what we brought last year, saying we have a little bit of an issue. We used to have an ongoing appropriation, and we haven't for a while. And I think this is just putting that back into the normal cycle.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Director Bach, and also perhaps a question for Andrew. how is this broken down? So for the 25.9 million, is the state essentially self-insuring on the liability side, but then you buy insurance policies for, say, property damage? Is that the basic structure? And on the liability side, does the state buy like a reinsurance or of some kind, or are we totally self-insured on the liability side?
Mr. Chairman, I think the answer to your questions is yes, that we are self-insured. I think we may have some kind of reinsurance to back that up. But for the vast majority of situations, we are paying out of our pool, I believe.
Mr. Chairman, follow up. So then this $5 million, is this money just going to get dumped into this $25.9 million pool, or is a piece of it or all of it going to be sent off to, say, a regular insurance company for your garden variety property insurance? How does the $5 million get broken down?
Mr. Chairman, I believe the 5 million is going into the pool. The pieces that this will pay for, and how we calculated the 5 million was based on the recommended funding for the anticipated liability, which is something the actuarial report is that's the component they identify. We also then worked with our CFO to identify what the overhead costs were. And then we've also tried to negotiate the insurance premiums and anticipate what those will be for this upcoming biennium. And so this 5 million will go into that pool to help pay for all those components.
Councilman Larson.
Thank you. So, Andrew, historically, I think we go back, that fund has been significantly higher than what the balance we keep it at now, isn't it? I think there's times it was upwards around 40 million.
52.
And so I think that goes to Chairman Nicholas's question, is that enough? And if so, fine, but just bring that to light. And then this 5 million would almost be considered a restoration of a step 2 or step 3 cut, because I think you took that cut a couple of years ago. Is that a fair assessment? Or
Representative, or I'm sorry, or Chairman Nicholas, Representative Larson, it is a partial clawback is the way, I don't like to use the word clawback, but it is a little bit. And it does go into the pool. I believe at one point we had 50 million or around there. I'm trying to think of what the actuary is recommending, and I think it was 40 something, 41.3. So I think that we can get there with the 5 million. The last thing I want to do is come in and ask for $20 million in the risk pool. So I think this is a conservative way to build it back up without just throwing some money into it, that amount of money into it. I will give a little bit of a shout out to the negotiations that Risk has done. We were the only risk pool that went down in cybersecurity insurance, one of the ones that we actually pay for an insurance. So they've been doing a very good job on negotiating. It's just that the unrest that is going on in other states is affecting our insurances as well.
Go ahead.
Director, what was the general cause of the 6.548 increase needed in the last biennium, please?
Chairman Nicholas, Representative Henderson, it was the same purpose, but it was a one-time. So that's why I said it's kind of a clawback, because that was a little bit of that was our clawback, was the 6 million. So the 5 million is trying to restore what we used to have an ongoing appropriation into the fund.
So it's fair to, just a quick follow-up, it's fair to say then that this was unexpected relative to the average that you're reflecting in your current budget?
Chairman Nicholas, Representative Henderson, can you repeat that question?
Well,
I apologize for that.
I'm just responding or reacting to what you said, is that you said that you're replacing in the current budget, I understand, an amount to reflect historical average or historical expectation. So this amount of increase last time maybe was unexpected.
During the, Chairman Nicholas, during the pandemic, there was a lot that was unexpected. So The cuts that we did right before the pandemic, we made some decisions there that maybe weren't the best decisions. But there were times when we needed an influx of cash. And so that was one of the decisions that I made, was to give some of that money for our cut. So that was on me and my decision that I made back then. And that's what that $6 million clawback was. And Rory did correct me. That is an ongoing appropriation as well, so. But we will continue to give you the actuarial reports so that you can see exactly where we are. I think that's helpful. I don't disagree with Chairman Nicholas that actuaries are sometimes difficult, but at least it gives us a point to look at. And I do think the 4.1 million will be adequate. And stepping up to that is what we'd like to do.
Well, and I say that because at least 3 different times, the actuaries for the Wyoming retirement system were wrong, substantially wrong. So it's just, so my question is, number one, does it need to be ongoing? I mean, why would we just do an automatic 5 million? Or is that a low number? And so that's number one. And number two, why don't we give you 7.5? If the actuary says you ought to be at 41 or 42, then, and if we happen to have cash now, but we may not 2 years from now, this might be a good time to do it. So,
Chairman Nicholas, I wouldn't disagree. We came up with this number, and we feel it was a sound number, but I understand where you're saying that we have money now. And so we would welcome that if that's the way the committee would like to look at it. I'm going to turn it over to Andrew too, if he can answer anything additional with your first question.
Chairman, Mr. Chairman, I agree with Director Bach on her comments. I think this is a calculation that we will do every year to find out what this target would be. And so certainly any additional funding that would be available to put in now would help us to make sure that, we will be closer if we have additional increases next biennium, then I'd have to come and ask for additional funds. I think we are asking based on our statutory requirements for the amount we think is projected to be needed this biennium to maintain that solvency. With the idea that hopefully we don't have to spend it all the way down. That's always the goal with this, but projecting what potentially the liability of the state might be. If there is additional money that the committee would put in there, that certainly would help in future. We don't anticipate that our costs are going to start decreasing as far as insurance premiums or anything like that.
and so your request has 2 purposes. Number one, to cover what you expect the claims to be for the next 2 years. And number 2, to have a sufficient fund, right? So if this is just what your claims are, that means in 2 years from now, we're going to be right back at 31 million. Our actuaries say we need 41 in there. So it seems to me we ought to cover both of those bases.
Mr. Chairman, I think I would agree with that. The ongoing nature of this, though, would help us to have that revenue, continuing to come in. The big significant, so when we broke this into 2 parts in asking for this request last year and then that request and then this request here. Last year, we calculated what we needed to get to the end of the biennium since it was a supplemental budget. This is then projecting the costs and with the additional updated actuarial report, with additional year of data for what we will need to get through this next biennium. In the past, risk has been funded where we've been given more appropriation authority to spend than we actually had revenue coming in. And this helps bring that back in line where it's more matching. So we will continue to have money going into the pool to help us pay back.
Well, part of the reason we don't make it ongoing is so that we know what we're spending and what we're, keep us updated on it. But anyway, any further questions? Madam Co-Chair. Okay. All right, please proceed.
The next division is General Services Division, Central Mail. We don't have an exception request in this unit. Similarly, we don't have.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director, so we all know the cost of postage continues to go up. I mean, we see that as we're getting ready to send out our holiday cards. And so on page 56 here, we see a negative ending balance projected for this account. And so I was wondering if you have plans to address that forecasted decline, and maybe why or why not there wasn't an exception request for this. Thank you.
Page 56, sorry.
Go ahead.
Chairman Nicholas, Representative Sherwood, I'm going to have to get back to you on this table. And I'm not sure the change that happened in that table, but I don't have an answer for you right now. So if I can get back to you, that would be wonderful. Apologize for that.
Okay, proceed.
I will say that I put a little plug in for Central Mail that everybody's getting one delivery today because it was very slick this morning. So if you didn't read your email and you're listening online, you will get your mail in the afternoon. So there's a little bit of a delay. Although there's not a request for leasing, there will be in the governor's inflation letter, leasing is included in there. Central Mail postage, as we just discussed, there's not an exception request. Unit vehicle replacement depreciation reserve, there's no request there. However, there will also be a motor pool request in the inflation letter that you'll see. So general service, we're now on page 64. Exception request for TRP for the motor pool as well. So that's 18,193. And that also includes not only the computers, but the peripherals and the software.
Please.
Director Balk or Kevin, I don't know which one. Why on mail services, the budget recommendation made by the state budget department, not the governor's rate?
Chairman Nicholas, Representative Larson, I saw that as well. I think it's just a typo.
Is that just probably just wondering?
Yep. And I think it's just, it is a governor rec. It's just one of the ones that slipped through.
Thank you.
And Mr. Co-Chairman, Director, I think you provided this in an email, but I'm going to ask anyway. Do you know how many computers and laptops are being replaced as part of the TRP rotation?
The total for the entire agency?
Just for this exception request.
I'm going to turn that over to the CFO.
Mr. Chairman, Madam Co-Chairwoman, can I get a response back to you on that?
You don't need to. It's fine. I was just proving a point to my colleagues. Thank you for indulging me.
Please.
Our mistake.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, please.
Going back to page 6, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Going back to page 63 in the motor vehicle pool, just looking at the account, it typically hovered a little higher than it suddenly drops here from 2 million down to 100, almost negative. Are we charging the right rates within the motor vehicle pool? Do those need to be adjusted? All of those questions about the motor vehicle pool would be greatly appreciated.
Chairman Nicholas, Representative Walters, I am going to turn that over to Roy as well.
Go ahead, Roy.
Mr. Co-Chair, Representative Walters, can I ask you to please repeat the question? I apologize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's in regards to the motor pool and the leasing rates. You look at the account history on chart on page 63, that balance in the last few years was up in the 2 million range. You look at the estimate for this biennial, it's actually goes negative for the total ending balance and remains there, then slightly bounces up. But so the question then is, are we charging the right rates back to the agency using the motor vehicle pool, or do those need to be changed so that we can maintain the balance and adjust for all the inflationary costs that we're seeing in vehicles? Just kind of a general perspective on the whole program is really what I'm asking, making sure it's sustainable going forward.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Walters, yes, the motor pool rates are going to be adjusted for the next biennium, effective July 1, because inflation has hit the motor pool, the cost of operations, maintaining vehicles, fuel, all of those factors. So there will be an increase in motor pool rates in the next biennium.
Chairman Nicholas, Representative Walters, that's also going to be, as I said earlier, reflected in the inflation letter from the governor.
And Don, on that inflation letter, it's going to affect all agencies. And so it's an issue with you being able to walk those through the budget books.
Mr. Chairman, we had something similar to that last year. That was easier because it was in a supplemental and we just put it in a section 300. I think that is the plan this year for the inflation letter, that we would put it in a section 300 and not every individual agency. There are pros and cons of both ways. One downside of putting it in the 300 is it breaks the time series for historical analysis of whether a unit is increasing or not.
Kevin?
Mr. Chairman, that's correct. With the inflation letter, you'll get the chart fields, the agency, the division, the unit, the expenditure series, the object code. That'll all be included in the inflation letter. And yes, the intent would be to have that funding in the 300 series and have the state budget department allocate that through the B11. And then the request will be for a standard budget. Last year, we asked for a standard budget. You provided it to us one time. I just want to note that our estimate that we provided to you last year was very close. We were 4% conservative on our estimate for the inflation on the letter last year, but that's what the intent will be.
And so then if you break it down by unit, agency and all that kind of stuff, is that something that you just give the LSO? So then, Don, you don't have to input all the data and you can...
Mr. Chairman, yes, that is the plan, that we would just put it in the 300 series. The downside, or the 300 section, excuse me, the downside with that is it won't really be populated into every individual agency's budgets before you until the 27th of the 8th.
Yeah, I see. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Director Balk. I just, going back, we had made a request on the numbers of computers and stuff. And that indeed is in your handout that you provided for us this morning, the 175 and the 226 monitors and keyboards and mouses and mice. Is keyboard plural of mouses mice? I don't know. But so we have that in your handout already. So thank you.
Chairman Nicholas, Representative Larson, I'm not sure it is by division. That's
Okay.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
So we are now on page 70. This is another funding switch for facilities operation. This is a position that's currently funded by the liquor division with the Department of Revenue. It's more appropriate to fund this unit with general funds and allow the state budget department to recover funding through the SWICAP.
Okay, go ahead.
And it's a net to zero. Yeah. So the next one on page 74, this is my number one priority, and I can't stress enough how much we need this position. We asked for this position specifically. It's a trades position, 13. It's a high position, but it's a program, it's a manager. So if we have a program or a project manager, if we have something going on that's fairly large, we don't have anybody to kind of general that project. When construction went out of A&I years ago, all of the TDS T13s, which is what this is, went with construction. I would say that we are the only agency that has this type of work to be done, state parks construction, that does not have a TDS T13. And we take care of all of these buildings, all of this square footage, all of these projects. And the TDST 13 is greatly needed to help organize those projects and get them done timely instead of having a carpenter organize a significant project. So if we had a TDST 13, we would not need to rely on employees that should be doing the work.
Or construction management.
Correct. And that's part of the problem because, you know, in my view and looking all this, construction probably needs another TDST 13.
Mr.
I think
Chairman.
they are telling us that as well.
Are they? Okay.
So Director Balk, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Director Balk is particularly as we had the conversation on major maintenance oversight issues that you have on there, you had to rely on, and it is a significant budget, and it is a significant, some of these projects as you get ready to bid them out and overseeing the contracts and all of that has just being played out in a vacuum, so to speak. Would that be a fair?
Chairman Nicholas, Representative Larson, yes, that would be fair. We have square footage that has increased by double-digit percentages and had acquired and acquiring additional buildings. It's one of those that if we had this person, the workers who are under them through all of the trades would be able to focus more on what they should be doing versus what they're trying to do their job plus manage a project. It's very difficult.
Mr. Chairman.
Follow up. So I was contemplating maybe having this conversation at the end, but this might fit really well is as we look at state-owned office space, let alone lease space, it too kind of seems to me to just lay out there in the bar ditch as far as having a conversation, how we approach purchases, construction, where are the most needs at. And Andrew, you and I have had some of this conversation, and would it be helpful kind of laying this conversation? I just would like your idea if we took on as an interim conversation how to really identify and prioritize where we need state office building space around the state, evaluate our current state office building, because as we look at schools in the CapCon, they have a mechanism for CapCon. We don't really have a good one to address through the priority process of addressing capital construction needs, would be it major maintenance, new construction, demolition, whatever that is, and develop something that then the legislature approves to where you have some guidance or that we can accomplish what you're doing. Have you given any additional thought to that? Is that something that we maybe ought to consider?
Chairman Nicholas, Representative Larson, we have talked a little bit about that, and I think in conjunction with the SBC, the State Building Commission, and the legislature would be helpful instead of, you know, having multiple interests in, you know, for example, the Riverton building is a good idea. It's a good building. It came up quick as far as I was concerned. So I think that is helpful if you had interim topics on where maybe another building would be or what makes sense. And I think correct, and working with the SBC on that as well.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Director Bach, can you tell me how major maintenance works right now? It's this $13 million you have of major maintenance to do, that's handled by the State Construction Department. Is that right?
Chairman Nicholas, Representative Larson, I would say no. I'm going to turn that over to Andrew so he can give you a much more detailed answer.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Stiff, we handle the major maintenance. We're responsible for working towards the projects. We do get some assistance and try to use the resources of the State Construction Department to the extent they have that availability, and they're very good at working with us on that. But ultimately, those projects and the spending of that money is on our staff. And so what has been largely happening is we've had our trades manager as well as the supervisors of our crews have taken on some portion of project manager responsibility in addition to trying to oversee their staff. And so if there's a boiler project that's listed on our major maintenance, it's probably going to go over towards our plumbing and our HVAC. If we have to replace rooftop units, our HVAC supervisor is the one that primarily works towards those. The goal of the project manager position is to help make a central point to help oversee that, make sure we're making progress on our lists, and to allow those those supervisors who have the area's expertise to focus on working with their staff, also providing that feedback to this project manager. So this will provide us someone in-house who can work very closely with those staff members on the various projects. We have everything from sealing the flooring in the parking garage a few years ago, replacing roofs, replacing HVAC units, building remodels or office space movement changes, as well as some of our planning projects. We have money for master planning and some of those studies that this person will be very equipped to help take lead on that. Those studies will work with lots of pieces of general services, and this person will be a good person to coordinate those.
Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Kind of a follow-up onto that, both on a division of duties between state construction and your agency, as well as division of determining when it goes one way or the other. We'll see within the capital construction bill, and have seen over the years, a new roof on the penitentiary or a new boiler at some location as an actual capital construction expenditure. And then we'll see, as we go back and look at the major maintenance reports, we'll see where a boiler was replaced or a roof was replaced using major maintenance dollars within A&I. So is there a dollar threshold? Is there how do the two agencies determine when it's going to be that kind of a project is going to be a major maintenance task through major maintenance